Dear colleagues, the RSS BJP regime is bent upon demographically engineering the basic dynamics of Jammu and Kashmir. The Indian government has issued more than 3.5 million fake domicile certificates to non-Kashmiri to turn Kashmir into a minority in their own homeland. And the ultimate goal is to change the outcome of any UN supervised plebiscite which may take place in Indian occupied Kashmir in the future. By trying to change the demography of Jammu and Kashmir, India is in complete violation of Security Council resolutions, including Resolution 47 in 1948, Resolution 51 in 1948, Resolution 80 in 1950, Resolution 91 in 1951, Resolution 122 in 1957, Resolution 123 in 1957, and the Fourth Geneva Convention. For the last 2 years, under the garb of security, the Indian security forces have unleashed a reign of terror on the people of Kashmir. There have been lockdowns, no internet, no banking facilities, no health facilities, and all this is also happening during the times of COVID. So by doing all these atrocious actions, the beautiful valley of Jammu and Kashmir has been turned into a virtual open prison, where human rights of the people are trampled with impunity. The atrocities of the Indian government against the people of Kashmir continues even today as we speak about the actions of the 5th of August. The plight of Kashmiris has been well documented by the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights in 2 of its reports in 2018 and 2019. But despite the atrocities of the Indian government, it has not been able to break the will of the Kashmiris. They continue to resist what the Indian authorities are doing with them politically, as well as by using the security forces. But today, unlike in the past, India does stand exposed internationally with its Hindutva agenda. And that very agenda not only usurps the human rights of people who are not of the Hindu religion, including Muslims, but is also affecting the various other minorities living in India, not only in Kashmir. The tragic situation in Kashmir speaks volumes of the policies of the Modi regime. The Hindutva ideology of the BJP government is a threat to peace and stability, not only in India, but to the entire South Asian region. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan has and will continue to raise the issue of Jammu and Kashmir at every forum. We will provide the diplomatic and moral support to our Kashmiri brothers and sisters. Pakistan expects that Jammu and Kashmir dispute will get the focus it merits from the international community. It is imperative on the international community to rise above the economic interests and pressurize India to reverse the key it has made I hope that we will have excellent discussions with the honorable panelists whom we have today. And please feel free to ask questions if they are in your mind about what has been happening in Kashmir. Because what I have noticed in my interaction with the young people, that there are certain misperceptions in their minds. And those misperceptions, whether they are regarding lawfare, whether they are regarding 370 or 35A, they need to be put in their right perspective. Thank you very much. And thank you for being with us. And please continue to follow the COVID protocol. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Andleeb Abbas is a member of the National Assembly since August 2018, Parliamentary Secretary for Foreign Affairs since September 2018. She is also a communication coach and advisor to the Prime Minister Imran Khan and develops his major speech content. In 2002, Ms. Andleeb was the only Pakistani to be declared as one of the top 30 strategic thinkers in the world by the World Bank, Washington, D.C. Social Development Department. She has served as head of PTI marketing team, director communications, PTI Punjab, and information secretary. She is an international speaker who is regularly invited by the Harvard University, National Defense University, US, and the School of Asian Studies, UK for leadership conferences and seminars. She was also a visiting faculty member at LUMS, LSE, and Imperial College. She has published many papers and over 2,000 articles in various notable newspapers. Ma'am, I do welcome you now for the inaugural address. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, August 5th is a black day. And it's a black day because, not just because it's a Kashmiri black day, I call it a black day in the history of humanity. And it raises questions in every aspect of human thought process, ideology, and life. Just imagine 14 million people being locked down for 730 days. And I'm asking you this because we've gone through lockdowns. And you have seen that the best of the nations and the most developed of people and educated of people, whether they're Australia, Canada, US, everywhere, after 3 weeks of lockdown, come out, become violent, and break all laws, because human beings by nature are not made to be caged. So every one of us can empathize with that. That if we cannot be locked down for a few weeks and we become worse than animals. Kashmiris have been locked down for 730 days on the go. Just imagine. People in Pakistan and all over the world don't want to be vaccinated. Even they say, fine, we may die, but we don't want to be vaccinated. The only thing that convinces them to become vaccinated in Pakistan is when you tell them that their SIMs will be taken away and their communication will be locked down, cut off. That convinces them that they should go for vaccination. Imagine 14 million people, communication breakdown, cut down from the world, from their loved ones, from each other, from cities, from news, from what's happening around them for 730 days. And that is what I call the black day in human history. Because though I'm not a historian, I do not remember any other incident in human history where almost a nation was caged, imprisoned, entrapped, cut down this long. So, ladies and gentlemen, every day is a shame on us, individually and collectively. Can we just remain silent on what's happening every moment to the 730 days imprisonment, 14 million people right next door? Can we remain indifferent to the 100,000 people who were fathers and mothers and sisters and brothers who were murdered and nobody even can register a case against them? Can we just look the other way when we find out that a nation is using rape as a state weapon? 11,000 reported women have been raped. The unreported is perhaps every hour. Can we just say, oh my God, when we hear that over 20,000 children have been shot in the eyes and on the face with pellet guns? And I remember reading about a child who says that I have become blind because of an Indian shooting me in the eyes with a pellet gun. But why the world is blind? That they cannot see that I am blind. Who has shot the world that they've become a zombie to what's happening to me? So, are we just going to look confused when the ambassador very rightly points out that there is a demographic incrimination going on, where women are being objectified and are classified as breeding a nation for the next white-skinned people in India, where they're waiting that enough domiciles of the Hindutva ideology are there so that when the plebiscite takes place, those who vote have nothing to do with Kashmiris. And then make it illegally legal that here you are, here's the vote, and they all want to remain with India. So, can we just shrug off our shoulders about this blatant, flagrant violation of laws, of ethics, of morality, of humanity? And it is, as the Prime Minister put it very rightly, not just an action, it is a mindset. And the most dangerous virus, more than the coronavirus, is a mindset virus. Because for corona, you have vaccines. But for a mindset which believes in hate, violence, suppression, oppression, we've not been able to have vaccines. And that is where we, as a collective community, need to really reflect and think what we can do and what we have done. Yes, we need to approach it in a three-pronged approach: the legal one, the political one, but even more important, the human one. So, as far as laws are concerned, yes, the government of Pakistan also, And worldwide, we are reaching out to the legal fraternities, we are reaching out to UN, we've written to UN, we've talked to UN, we've presented dossiers to UN, and we will keep on presenting that. It does not mean that if the response is not there, we should think that it's over. The law, as they say, is blind. The legal fraternity says the law is blind, but it should be blind to being biased. It should not be blind to the basic human values. So we need to pinch and probe and provoke and pester every legal door. And we will do that. And we are doing it. We've been sending a lot of legal and other, and that's why you have the UN resolution coming up. That's why you've had in the last 2 years more UN sessions taking place on this subject than ever in the history. And never undermine any session, any word, any seminar. They all matter. The fact that you've come out in the virus to come over here, listen, think, and then maybe talk to a few people about it or write about it or, just reflect over it. You are committed. So the legal part is there, and then the political part. And I think that has been the biggest turn in the last 2 years that I have, being in the Foreign Office, witnessed. When I walked into the Foreign Office 2 years ago, we were defensive, we were lost. When we used to talk about it, the response we used to receive is, you people are exporting terror, and there is this neighbor of yours which is being wronged with your activities. Alhamdulillah, the political strategy has been effective and impactful enough now that the tables have been turned. Because politically we decided that we are going to expose the RSS ideology of Prime Minister Modi. And if you see, there has been more written on it, talked about it in international media than ever. And it is this mindset that we are working. This is the most dangerous mindset, not just for India or for Kashmiris or for us, for the world. Because you're talking about a majoritarianism mindset, which is a complete contrast to what India claims. Secularism, not at all. They're very clear about it. Racial superiority of Hinduism, Hindutva, is clearly written in the RSS ideology, which teaches and practices violence and hatred. Mahatma Gandhi, who practiced non-violence, was assassinated by Godse, the founder of RSS. And everybody knows it, it's written, it's a fact. It's written in history. And the fact that they are trained on the Nazi philosophy is no hidden secret, where annihilation of anything non-Hinduism is considered a reverent act. So this is the philosophy, and that's what the Prime Minister in UN, and that's what the government of Pakistan, the Foreign Minister have been talking about, that if you think that this is going to end in a couple of nations trying to politically outscore each other, no. The world is in danger. The UN's resolutions' sanctity is in danger. So it's a much larger issue than just a couple of neighbors having a history they can't forget. So politically, we are very solidly exposing India. And today, if the international media consultants and think tanks are writing on it, and Amnesty International has mentioned again and again in their reports. There are 3 reports now by UN on the HR abuses over there. The European Parliament is discussing it. The American senators are talking about it. Some things which were never done before. So these are important moments in our life. These are defining moments. And these can be tipping points. So legally, politically, and the third one, which is very important, I think the most important thing, is through the citizens of the world, through humanity. And you can see Black history, how much they had politically and legally done a lot. Dr. Martin Luther King gave his life against apartheid. But what really has changed has been the pressure of the public. The Black Lives Matter movement by the citizens, not just of America, but by every other nation during the coronavirus, has done more to change the laws and policies in America, to change the police mindset in America, than all the charters. And that's where the citizen movement, global movement, is important. I have been constantly writing on the hashtag Kashmiri Lives Matter. And I think this is what you can do. Each one of you can promote and talk about the Kashmiri Lives Matter and expose how they're not mattering to the world and to the conscience of the people around. So the biggest example, I tell you, is the Kashmir Premier League. It was a tournament being held in Pakistan where some international players were invited. But when you have a mindset of suppression and oppression, then you can't distinguish what to do and what not to do. And lo and behold, through that mindset, India threatened the international players. So just imagine international players who are not even citizens of India are being told, don't go to Pakistan to play cricket, to commentate on cricket. And 2 of the cricketers came out in the open and said, we are going. And it became an international issue. And Pakistan took it up. The PCB wrote to ICC, and the ICC was forced to tell India to mind your own business. No law prevents a country to have an internal league and invite anybody else. So you see, it became an international issue. And these are things which are small, but which can make a big difference. So out comes an British Indian cricketer, Monty Panesar. And he says, I was also invited. But you know what? I'm sorry I can't come. Because I have Indian family. I'm a British, but I have family in India. And they won't allow me to meet them. Do you think these things are not registering? They are. And that's why I say the third strategy, which is the global citizen movement, that is how we will, in this today's world of social media, we will succeed. Because remember, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So we must stand for this. Our Prime Minister is going to stand. And like he says, even if I'm the last man standing, I will stand. And that is the commitment you all need to do, that in whichever circle of influence you are, you must stand. Because if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for everything. And being human is all about not just being about yourself, but about being for others, being for others. If you can't being for others, you're not human. So today is very important, and every day is important. As the days go by, the responsibility on each of us increases, and we are powerful people in our own right. Never think that it's just the law, it's just the rich countries. It's each one of us. In fact, if you look at the history, all revolutions have been brought by one ordinary man somewhere who's done something to inspire the world. Rarely has it been governments. So, like I said, we are with Kashmir. We have committed that we are going to fight their case at every level, at every turn of events, and every day. I thank you, all of you, to come over here, show this commitment, stand for the cause, and wish you all the best of luck for further standing. I thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We begin our first session, which titles Kashmir Bleeds, with a keynote address by Mr. Ubaidur Rahman Nizamani, who is Director General South Asia and SAARC. Mr. Nizamani joined Foreign Service of Pakistan in 1995. He served from November 2019 till date as Deputy Chief of Mission Embassy of Pakistan, Washington, D.C. He has served as Minister Political Embassy of Pakistan, Washington, D.C. from April 2016 to October 2019. He has been Principal Advisor to the Ambassador on all bilateral political issues between Pakistan and the United States. From February 2013 to March 2016, he served as political counselor and then Deputy High Commissioner to New Delhi, India. From January 2009 to June 2011, Mr. Nizamani served as political counselor in Dhaka, Bangladesh. And from September 2005 to January 2009, he served as First Secretary and then political counselor, Embassy of Pakistan to Berlin, Germany. Sir, I welcome you for the keynote address.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. As-salatu was-salamu ala khatamil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Thank you very much for a very kind introduction, sir. President, Institute of Regional Studies, Ambassador Nadeem Riaz, distinguished guests, my seniors, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, and a very good morning. 5 August 2021 marks the completion of an unprecedented 24 months long military siege and draconian curbs on the fundamental freedoms of the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Curbs imposed upon them in the aftermath of illegal and unilateral actions by India on 5 August 2019. We are all aware that the situation, especially the human rights and the humanitarian situation in IIOJK has worsened since India's unilateral, illegal, and inhuman actions. India's reinvasion and reoccupation of the illegally occupied territory through its machinations, various steps to alter demography of IIOJK have further alienated the Kashmiri people. Over 900,000 Indian occupation forces have made IIOJK a prison. However, I must say that India has failed to subjugate Kashmiris. In the continuous military siege and unprecedented restrictions on the fundamental freedoms that were imposed in IIOJK, Kashmiris have suffered immensely. India has sought to unilaterally alter the internationally recognized disputed status of Jammu and Kashmir and has taken unlawful steps in the occupied territory to change the demographic structure. They wish to convert Kashmiris into a minority in their own land. All these unilateral and illegal steps contravene several United Nations Security Council binding resolutions, which embodied the principle that the final disposition of the state of Jammu and Kashmir will be made in accordance with the will of the people, expressed through the democratic method of a free and impartial plebiscite conducted by the United Nations. Despite the solemn commitments made by the Government of India in numerous official communications to Security Council, to Pakistan, to other states, and to the people of Jammu and Kashmir to abide by and implement Security Council resolutions and decisions, India has progressively reneged on all these commitments and promises. Ladies and gentlemen, the human rights situation and human rights violations in the occupied territory are alarming. Kashmiri houses are being destroyed to inflict collective punishment on Kashmiri communities and neighborhoods. To this day, the Kashmiri leadership remains incarcerated under trumped-up charges. Extrajudicial killings and arbitrary arrests and detentions also continue unabated. Over 390 Kashmiris have been martyred by the Indian occupation forces in IIOJK since August 5, 2019. During this year alone, the Indian occupation forces have extrajudicially killed 85 innocent Kashmiris, including young boys and women, arbitrarily arrested and detained more than 500 Kashmiris, and destroyed more than 30 houses of the Kashmiri people. The Indian occupation forces operate with impunity under the cover of draconian laws such as Armed Forces Special Powers Act, Public Safety Act, and other unlawful and illegal acts. Ladies and gentlemen, in its attempts to change the demography of the state, the BJP government has already issued over 3.4 million fake domicile certificates to non-Kashmiris to settle in IIOJK. They wish to undermine the possibility of the plebiscite in accordance with the UNSC resolutions. These actions are in violation of several UNSC resolutions, international law, particularly the Fourth Geneva Convention. Ladies and gentlemen, I must reiterate that all of the illegal and inhuman Indian actions and operation has only strengthened the resolve of the Kashmiri people to stand firm in their quest for freedom from Indian occupation and operation. Pakistan has forcefully and effectively drawn international attention towards the grave human rights and humanitarian situation in the occupied territory at all multilateral and international forums, and also in important world capitals bilaterally. Significantly, the UN Security Council has deliberated upon the Kashmir issue, the Kashmir dispute, thrice since August 2019. This has happened for the first time in the past 55 years. And it has debunked the Indian myth that somehow occupied Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, was somehow an internal matter to India. The international media and human rights organizations have been near unanimous in their condemnation of India for its illegal actions and human rights violations in the occupied territory. And there have been many reports that have been issued by the UN bodies and independent organizations. What is it that we are asking India to do? India must reverse all its illegal actions that it has taken, especially after August 5, 2019, immediately. It should immediately lift the continuing inhuman military siege in the occupied territory. It should remove restrictions on communications, movement, and peaceful assembly. It should release the incarcerated Kashmiri political leaders and allow them to express the wishes of the Kashmiri people. India must free immediately all the arbitrarily and illegally detained Kashmiris, especially the leadership of the All Parties Hurriyat Conference, who are the true representatives of Kashmiris. It must reverse the new domicile rules that are aimed at changing the demographic structure of occupied Jammu and Kashmir. It must cancel all the fake domicile certificates issued so far. It should remove the draconian laws that grant impunity to the occupation forces. It should allow access to UN observers, international human rights and humanitarian organizations, and the international media to the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And India must fulfill its obligations of holding a free and impartial plebiscite under the UN and let Kashmiris exercise their inalienable right to self-determination as enshrined in numerous relevant UNSC resolutions. On its part, ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan's objective has been, it remains, peaceful resolution of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute, as per the wishes of the Kashmiri people, the UNSC resolutions, and expressed through a free and impartial plebiscite. Pakistan remains committed to extending all possible support to their Kashmiri brothers and sisters in their just cause for the right to self-determination. Kashmiris stand out in the world as a brave and resilient people who continue to render enormous sacrifices for the cause of freedom. A people so determined in their just struggle cannot be denied their rights for too long. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. The honorable speakers for this first session are Ambassador Afrasaib Hashmi and Mr. Altaf Wani. Ambassador Afrasaib Hashmi joined the Foreign Service of Pakistan in 1984. He was posted to the Embassy of Pakistan in Washington, D.C. in 1987. Later, he was sent to New Delhi as First Secretary in 1994. He was posted to India the second time as Pakistan's Deputy High Commissioner in 2006. Ambassador Afrasaib was serving as Pakistan's Deputy Permanent Representative to the IAEA in Vienna when India conducted its nuclear test in 1998. He was also a Counselor Minister in the Pakistani mission in Beijing from 2003 to 2006. Ambassador Afrasaib was appointed Pakistan's High Commissioner to Bangladesh in 2011 and later as High Commissioner to New Zealand in 2016. At the headquarters, Ambassador Afrasaib served as Additional Foreign Secretary in charge of the Asia-Pacific region. Ambassador Afrasaib has authored books which are Encyclopedia on Pakistan's relations with India, China, and the US relations with South Asia, Ancient and Contemporary Pakistan, 1971, Fact and Fiction, The Greatest Man in History is Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So over to you.
Today is an important day, a milestone, a very negative milestone in the ongoing developments in the subcontinent since the last so many decades. My colleagues would focus on this illegal annexation of whatever happened 2 years ago in August. My focus of attention has been on the motivation and the motivating factors that led to this negative decision by New Delhi. We are told by scholars that BJP is the political face of the RSS. RSS is Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh. Bharatiya Janata Party, we are told, is the benign face of the RSS. Well, it might be correct, but having dealt with India for more than 15 years and having lived in New Delhi, maybe 7.5 years, I can say with full authority that this mindset of RSS that we are talking about has been existing in the subcontinent, in India, for a very, very long time, much before 26th of September 1925 in Nagpur, when Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh was established by Hejewade. It was but natural for this mindset to survive and exist. In my mind, India has never, ever been a secular country. India has always been a Hindu country, but since Vajpayee earlier, and later on, since Modi came into power, India has become a Hindu fundamentalist country. If you look at the internet, if you study the so-called scholarly works by those who have been studying in, as they say, the best universities in the world, They would say that RSS is the largest welfare organization in the world, which is the biggest lie I have ever heard in my life. It is the largest fundamentalist organization in the world. It is, if I'm not taken negatively, and if you believe and trust me, let me assert politely that RSS is the largest terrorist organization in the world. Even in India, people are apprehensive about RSS. RSS is a secretive organization. People do not feel very comfortable discussing matters relating to RSS because they have their own apprehensions with regard to this extremist organization. One of the fervent supporters, Balasaheb Thackeray, Bal Thackeray of Mumbai, he was an ally of the RSS, and he very clearly said that if the Indian army rapes Kashmiri women, what's wrong with it? He didn't say it 2 days or 2 years. He's dead. He didn't say it now. He said it in the 1990s, early 1990s, and an international magazine had published his articles, his interview, and many others would not really disagree with this point of view. The first Indian Army chief, Field Marshal Karyappa, is on record having commended the RSS people, saying, you've done a wonderful job for India. You do those things for us which we cannot do. And what are those commendable acts committed by RSS? Well, in 1947-48, when Hyderabad crisis took place, one of the world-class statesmen, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru, such an intelligent person, he says he declared it as a police action in the state of Hyderabad. It was not a police action. More than 200,000 Muslims were massacred. And those massacres were not perpetrated or conducted by the Indian police, nor by the Indian army. Yes, they were fully involved, but the actual brutalities were perpetrated by the Karsevaks, by the activists of the RSS. We are told by so many people that Pakistani tribesmen attacked Kashmir in 1948, which provoked the war between India and Pakistan. And many intellectuals hold Pakistan responsible for this. Ian Stephens says something else. He says more than 200,000 Muslims were massacred in Poonch. As a result, there was a provocation, and tribesmen attacked from tribal areas. They attacked Kashmir. And those more than 200,000 Muslims in Poonch were massacred by the Dogra army. This is what our intellectuals tell us. Well, Dogra army was certainly involved. But on ground, the actual atrocities were committed by the RSS people. In 1971, the RSS people, wearing the uniforms of the Pakistan army, conducted atrocities against the Bengalis. In 2002, Babri Masjid, when Mr. Modi was the Prime Minister, was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, atrocities were committed by the RSS. Well, Harinder Babeja, a very prominent journalist in India. She told me and others in the embassy, more than 10,000 Muslims were massacred in Gujarat. But if you go to the internet today and check, they'll say that around 900 people, Muslims and Hindus, died during those clashes. What a lie. What a big lie. And since the last 2 years, what we know, what is happening in Kashmir is the benign version of the actualities. When gundas are let loose during the dead of the night, they do everything, whatever they want to. BBC and CNN are not going to tell you. All India Radio, Hindustan Times, Times of India, they are not going to break this news to us, you know. We have to be investigative. We have to be correct. And what is the RSS mindset? Please try to look at the Kashmir issue from the Indian perspective. Take off your Pakistani glasses, spectacles, and wear the Indian glasses. And then you'll understand their mindset. They say that the wound that was inflicted on the Hindu mind in 1947 with the creation of Pakistan is too deep. They see a revival or a resurrection of 1947 in Kashmir, just in case what Pakistan wants actually happens. This is their mindset. Look at the articles. Meet the RSS people. I used to meet them on some occasions. My experience is, what is their ideology? For them, Kashmir is a very small issue. Kashmir is a non-issue for them. The main issue is Pakistan. After having done whatever they did to Kashmiris, they would like to do it to Pakistan. Pakistan is the main issue. And since 9/11, even Pakistan is not the issue. Now the issue is Islam. I'm not saying all this as an expression of emotional outburst. It is correct. You must understand this is what they are thinking about. Earlier they used to say, Kashmir se Kanaiya Kumari tak. Ye hamara, atak se katak tak. Ye hamara watan hai, ye hamara desh hai. But read other books. Meet people. They would say that Kaaba was a Hindu temple. Kaaba of the Muslims in Mecca was actually a Hindu temple. Taj Mahal, Tejumala. I am not saying that each and every Indian subscribes to this view. I am not saying that. There are intellectuals, brilliant intellectuals. They have been contradicting the RSS ideology. Very brilliantly, they've been doing it. And you watch their videos coming here and there. They speak in Oxford and Cambridge, Harvard. But if a Pakistani intellectual, our Director General South Asia, a very articulate man, if he speaks here, who is going to listen to him? by people sitting in Jung, in Muzaffargarh, in Zob, in Sargodha. It doesn't matter. So if an intellectual speaks against the RSS while sitting in New Delhi in a very brilliant and articulate manner, a person sitting in the village in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Cuttack, West Bengal, Murshid, or Northeast or South, he is not bothered. He is not bothered at all. My ancestors helped Hindu families migrate to India in 1947. Persecutions took place here and there. We all know that, and we're sad. Why did it happen in 1947? Why did people kill each other? Partition, Mr. Qaid-e-Azam never wanted any bloodshed. And when I was in New Delhi, I met the grandsons of those people who migrated to India in 1947. They were grateful to me, saying that your family saved us. I asked them just one question. जब ये बाबरी मस्जिद हुई थी, तो क्या आपका क्या reaction था? They said, as Hindus, we were happy. As human beings, we were sad. I'm talking of balanced people in India. I'm talking of those people in India. Nathuram Godse assassinated Gandhi, the father of nation of India, on 30th January 1948. According to Pankaj Mishra, who wrote an article in the New York Times, I think 9 years ago, 10 years ago, I don't remember the exact year. I read it myself. When Nathuram Godse was about to be executed, he had a last meeting with Gopal, his brother. And Gopal was advised by Nathuram Godse that when he is hanged to death for having killed Gandhi, then the remains, the burnt out remains of his body should be saved in an urn by his brother Gopal, and those remains should be poured into the river Indus when river Indus becomes part of Bharat. This is their mindset. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Second speaker of this session, Mr. Altaf Wani. He's the chairman, Kashmir Institute of International Relations. He is a member of All Parties Hurriyat Conference, IIOJK chapter, and also a representative of Jammu Kashmir National Front. He has served as vice chairman, UJC, in 1996, and thenceforth he worked as general secretary, UJC, from 1997 to 1999. Mr. Wani has served as a permanent representative, International Islamic Federation of Students Organization to the UN, Geneva, from 2012 to 2014, and currently he is serving as a representative, World Muslim Congress at the UN, Geneva, from 2015 to present. Mr. Wani has been actively involved with the partner organization Conciliation Resources London within the framework of conflict transformation in Jammu and Kashmir. For the last several years, he has been closely engaged in cross-LOC people-to-people contact. Mr. Wani has delivered numerous lectures on Kashmir issue to the different universities and diplomats at the Foreign Services Academy, Islamabad. He has written numerous articles published in Pakistani print media. Sir, over to you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Ambassador Nadeem Riaz, for giving me this opportunity. Ambassador Afrasaib, Ambassador Farukh Amil sir, who has been a great mentor of mine and his assignment at Geneva. I've been asked to talk about Kashmir and open prison. Well, it was, this coin was recently after the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, when different Indian civil society groups visited Kashmir, including the former Foreign Minister of India, Yashwant Sinha. They coined this term in their report that Kashmir has been turned into an open prison. But let me remind you, in 1995, a EU delegation visited Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir and also Azad Jammu and Kashmir. But in their report in 1995, they said that Kashmir is a beautiful prison. But since then, lot has been changed. Kashmir is no more a beautiful prison now. Indian Army, all institutions are at war with the people of Kashmir. You can find the graveyards, martyrs' graveyards in the length and breadth of Kashmir. And the data is available with you, how many people have been killed, maimed, raped, and tortured. This is now a UN record. But what happened, as Ambassador Riaz was telling us, what led to India to take these actions which they took on August 5th, 2019. He articulately described about the BJP, RSS nexus and the ideology of BJP, what they are meant for and how they are looking at the things in this region and beyond. For Kashmir, as you know, when this India illegally occupied the occupied territory, and then they had a negotiation with those collaborators who were at that side with the Indian side, and then inserted Article 370 and 35A in the Indian Constitution in order to satisfy their will. But even at that time, Shama Prasad Mukherjee, who was the founder of Jansangh, now we call it BJP, from RSS, different things, but Shama Prasad Mukherjee founded Jansangh, and he led a huge campaign against these two articles, why these articles were inserted in Indian Constitution, Article 370 and 35A, and he toured in length and breadth of India and tried to muster support that these articles should be done away with and Kashmir should be integrated fully in the Indian Union. And in that course of time, when he was in Srinagar, he died in Srinagar. But to satisfy what BJP did in 2019, August 5th, was to satisfy what Shama Prasad Mukherjee has said, for which he gave his life, or for which. And now, what is happening in Kashmir, as was said by earlier speaker also, that already for last 33 years, especially, people of Kashmir have suffered a lot at the hands of the Indian occupation forces. The human rights violations were everywhere. But from August 5th, the BJP government, even before that, during its first period, they embarked on Dowell Doctrine. These were four main pillars of that. First was to debase and discredit the Kashmiri leadership. This was the first one, to debase and discredit the Kashmiri leadership. You might have seen lots of fabricated cases were charged against the Kashmiri leadership. Lot more was written on them, and the Indian media was 24/7 against the Kashmiri leaders, pro-freedom leaders, against charging them with different things. So, and then put them behind the bars in the Indian jails in different parts of India, and thereby debasing them from the mainland of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. This was the first thing which they did. The second was to delegitimize the Kashmir's freedom struggle. For that, now it is in public domain. Now yesterday they have started to counter that. Also, the EU Dispo Infolab, what they revealed for last 15 years, what Indians did around the globe to delegitimize Kashmir's freedom struggle, to associate with the cross-border terrorism or with the pan-Islamic movements and all that. This was the second point, and also then to dilute Kashmir's identity. So on these things, they already started working. On August 5th, they implemented it. It was fully after abrogating these articles. We won't go into the constitutional details because all is in the public domain now, how they did it. Was it constitutional or was it not constitutional? If it would have been a constitutional thing, if it would have been a legal thing, then Supreme Court of India would have dared to take up this matter. They would have given some decision on it. But Supreme Court of India knows that this is illegal action on behalf of the government of India, so they are not taking up this matter at all. So this is there. Because there were lots of litigations against this before that, and in all those, there was one, the same kind of thing was done before, but at that time, the Supreme Court of India said that Article 370 is non-revocable, it cannot be abrogated. But now you see that is there, and they are not taking up this case. So in this period of time, we have discussed and we have been discussing about the demographic changes which are taking place in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. You can see the way they modified the domicile law. The domicile law is modified in such a way that at that very moment, when it was modified, 2.2 million Indians were qualifying for the citizenship of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, even at that time. But if this process goes on and on, if it remains like this, and within a period of 2.2 means 1/4 of the population of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir at the very moment, and then there are reports that they have already given 3.4 million, but that includes also the native Kashmiris. When we report 3.4, that's also native Kashmiris because the state subject has been replaced by the domicile. So this process, this fast track process is on in order to change the demography. On the other front, they changed, they attacked the language, culture, and all those landmarks which were associated with Muslims or with Islam. Urdu is no more now the official language in Kashmir. 133 years, Urdu remained an official language in Kashmir. Now it has been replaced by the Hindi. And along with that, Divangari has replaced the Persian Arabic scripture that now the madrasas are also asked to teach Hindi in their premises. So by this way, they are taking away the language of Kashmiris, their culture, changing all the landmarks. Now, recently, how they are putting their agenda in Kashmir, recently they construct a huge tunnel connecting the Jammu and Kashmir Valley, and that was named after the Shama Prasad Mukherjee, the ideologue of Bharatiya Jansan. In a way, in Srinagar, they are changing all those landmarks which are associated with Muslims and renaming them with the Hindus and like Sardar Patel, Shama Prasad Mukherjee and others. Along with that, on one hand, they are changing the landscape of demography in Kashmir. They are changing the social landscape in Kashmir, the religious landscape in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. But having done so much in Kashmir till date, you can see the government of India has not been able to suppress or subjugate the people of Kashmir by all these machinations, be those legal, be those military, be those political. In a political machinization, they try to create new political structures in Kashmir in order to replace the old ones. The old ones have not been on their side on this issue, so they are trying to create new political structures. In this way, they also conducted those BDC elections and other things under a military siege. But that has not done them what they actually wanted. But still, they are on a way on their mission in order to annex Kashmir totally with the Indian Union and to dismantle each and everything which is related with the Kashmiri identity, which is related with the Islam and Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. But the resistance which the people of Kashmir are putting in, and as has been said that most of the former speaker, the Director General from SAARC, he was telling us that different reports from different organizations do come and still are pouring in. And recently, Human Rights Watch also issued a report in this, and the Swedish think tank described India as a not a democracy, but a practical monarchy or something else. I don't remember the proper name of that. But the condemnation level at international level, the condemnation has not been that it could stop India. And Indian foreign minister is on record in his book. He says, we don't hardly care about any condemnations, about any of the things. We will go on what we are doing in. I think Ambassador Farukh Amil is witness to that. When the former Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial executions present his report in the UN Human Rights Council, that was a very powerful report and very articulate report, and that was a total incitement against India. But at that time, Indian permanent mission said that Mr. Reporter, behave like reporter, not like like prosecutor. So this is the way Indians are dealing with the international organizations. Indians are dealing with the human rights organizations. Amnesty was thrown out of Kashmir. So what is needed from our part? I tell you, I will quote a quote from a Kashmiri leader about our resistance. He says that the Kashmiris are stuck in a dangerous conflict, but look at their political valor. They are facing it manfully. This is like dancing in the mouth of a lion, with such a style, not letting to be swallowed by the beast. However, while crying in the process, the cries should be heard, and while smiling, the smile should be understood. To smile with diversion is never pleasing. The smile in diversion conveys what it does: anger, alienation, and turmoil. So the people of Kashmir are doing their part with all that, what they are doing. What the parliamentary secretary was telling us, the people's movement. What we see the governments do, the foreign office does its job, what they are assigned to in a certain way. What we lack, that is the people's movement at our level. And that people's movement, if we start that people's movement in Pakistan, in academia, in other institutions, that can lead us to earn more friends at international level. If our universities, our think tanks will collaborate with the international think tanks, international civil society, that can earn us more support at international level. That is the only way to bring India's proud down and to make India equitable at international level, unless and until we create an awareness at international level. We will be talking to each other. We will be condemning India, but with no results. So it is the responsibility of our youth, educated youth, especially equipped with today's knowledge and all that. They should create that, help us in creating that citizens movement around the globe, help your government in order that government, whatever government says at international level, that is substituted by the public support at large. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I now open the round for question and answer session. Please introduce yourself.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Arish Khan. I'm a research analyst at the Institute of Regional Studies. A few days ago, we had a webinar with a renowned British historian, Ian Talbot. In that webinar, he said that by abrogating Articles 370 and 35A, the Indian government had created an untenable situation for itself and for Kashmiris. So he was of the view that sooner or later, India might have to take a step or two backward. How much do you agree with his assessment? And what do you think those step or two backward would look like? Any of the two panelists can answer the question.
To me, when I look at this, the only linkage between what Indian Constitution has created in order to govern the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir was Article 370. This was the only link through which the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir was governed by the India. And then 35 is the subsidiary one, saw something else, which has stated with state subject laws in Jammu and Kashmir. By abrogating Article 370, I think constitutionally and legally speaking, when an international legal expert speaks on it and it takes it, he says that now there is no connection, there is no the legal way of India to govern Kashmir. But might is right. What they have done it all unconstitutionally, illegally, and by not taking into account its international obligations and even the local obligations which they had, local commitments with Pakistan or the people of Kashmir, with those people with whom they have negotiated this Article 370 and 35A. So what will be the backward steps? To me, the backward steps as a Kashmiri, actually, the only backward step is that India should come to the table and implement the UN resolution on Kashmir, which they have accepted. But looking at the incompetence of India and the arrogance of India, we can't see that happening. And the situation at the international level, we don't see India coming to those terms. But what Pakistan has proposed to most recently, the Prime Minister of Pakistan and every Pakistani stakeholder is talking about is, unless the government of India goes back, takes back steps of August 5th, 2015, there can be no talks between India and Pakistan. So this is the one thing where I think the government of Pakistan should stand for. They should not come any other international pressure in order to have some sort of dialogue with India at any level. So I think that's the only.
I have a comment to make. Indians are masters of diplomatic tricks. There is no permanent turning back at all. You must be very, very clear. Yes, they can pretend that they're taking steps, a little step backward. Ultimately, the final decision they have taken, and there will be no turning back in the long run, especially when they have the support of the fundamentalist elements in the United States, in Israel. and the West is with them. This is an opportunity they got in a millennia. They will never get it again. They know it. And Kashmir to them is a small issue. Larger issues are too large for them to discuss at present.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. I'm Nabila Jafar. I'm research analyst at the Institute of Regional Studies. Sir, as you said that India is inherently, RSS especially, is inherently against the Pakistan's creation of Pakistan. So how much this Pakistan's official policy of providing moral and diplomatic support to Kashmiris would make any difference?
You see, we were created in 1947. Many countries did not like our establishment. Many countries. Obviously, India did not like it. And I don't have to be a genius to tell you the names of those countries who did not like our creation. If Kashmiris were Christians, the issue would have been resolved. If Kashmiris would have been Buddhists, Hindus, the issue might have been resolved. But it is a Muslim issue also. I'm not saying it's a Muslim issue as such. What I'm saying is that this issue affects the Muslims. Therefore, this issue has continued to linger on. As Pakistanis, it is our duty to extend moral, diplomatic, political support to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. They are our brothers, and we will continue to do it.
So do you think that India can balance the role as a leading player in the global affairs while simultaneously persecuting the human rights of Muslims within India and Kashmir? Can they balance this, both the roles? Don't you think there would be eventually an international pressure?
You see, please try to understand. India has never been a one country in history. Today it is Republic of India. Earlier it was British India. Before that it was Muslim India. And India has always comprised, India has always consisted of small states, kingdoms, sultanates, Bengal, Punjab, Kashmir, Balochistan, Sindh, Dravidia. They were different states. It's just like, if somebody says that England is Europe and Europe is England, this is not correct. France is in Europe, England, Germany, right? Italy, Spain, Portugal, they are parts of Europe. Now, when the overwhelming majority of the people of India, of South Asia, of India, Hindus, when they become assertive, that this is dangerous for India. This is very dangerous for modern India. If you ask me, if we have a prescient mind, if we have the premonition to understand diplomatic forebodings, maybe India will not remain a one country. But I'm not saying that this is going to happen within the next 5 years, 10 years. No. Maybe never in our lifetime. But the edifice, the platform, of fundamentalism is bad for India. And Indians are worried. Indian diplomats are worried. People that we used to interact with, the educated, diplomatically alive people, they are worried what is happening to their country. But again, there are religious zealots there who are ruling them. You see, RSS is not just an entity, it is a mindset that has existed in India for years, for centuries. It was formally concretized by Hejewade in Nagpur in 1925. But the point being that this mindset has seeped into the Indian raw, into the Indian intellectuals, into the mindset of Indian IB. They are taking over the universities in Delhi, in Kolkata, in Banaras, and other places. So to presume that India will emerge as a superpower or an important country, well, it might. America would like that to happen. Europe would like that to happen. But they wanted so many things to happen in Afghanistan. They failed. How can they make predictions about India? And a Pakistani knows Indians much better than the Europeans. An Indian knows Pakistan much better than people from outside, because we have commonalities. We do not have identicalities. Please understand, we do have commonalities. We understand them much better. And those who have been watching India, I feel that moderate Indians should be worried about the future of the country, and they are actually worried.
Sir, I have another question. As you said that Kashmir is not just a territorial or an unfinished partition agenda for Pakistan, but we support Kashmiris because they are our Muslim brothers. But why don't we see the same kind of sentiments and pain among other influential Muslim countries for the people of Kashmir? And how can we mobilize support? Like, to what extent we can mobilize support from other Muslim countries for Kashmir?
There are certain issues, since you've asked me the question, there are certain issues, well, everybody has his own perspective. There are certain issues which even I would not like to discuss here. You are a research scholar. You should understand things better. Study the history of the Ottoman Empire. What happened? 1914, 1918. Then what happened after that? The political entities. Who was Lawrence of Arabia? What was the Balfour Declaration? What was the first Zionist Congress, 1897 in Switzerland? What happened there? And then Middle East, people should ask that why is America always supportive of Israel? And why do the Muslim countries lose when they have so much money? So I don't have to answer this question. Everybody here is intelligent enough to understand what I'm trying to say.
Thank you, sir. As far as the moment is concerned in Kashmir, you have seen, despite all to be honest enough, the repression which is taking place at this time, we have seen more difficult times than this. Today is the age of media, age of social media, and we come to know each and everything what is happening. But during 90s, we have seen very hard times in Kashmir, but we survived. Despite all the military might which India used in Kashmir, we survived. This time they had a legal warfare along with that also in Kashmir. But we should remain very much clear about it, that the Kashmiris have, even those Kashmiris who at one time or the other time have collaborated with India, in their hearts and minds, they have not aligned with India in that way. They settle or waiting for that chance that they should exercise their rights. So this moment, the current moment, I'll say, it is now transformed into the fourth generation of Kashmir. But at this time, we don't see new leadership on the arena. You can't see that because all of that media crackdown and no freedom of assembly, no freedom of expression, and they don't allow you to assemble anywhere. They don't allow you to use the media. If you go to the IIOJK media from August 5th till this date, before that you will see some part of that media was dedicated towards the moment, towards these human rights violations, towards those pro-freedom leaders and all that. But nobody dares now to do it. It's because of they have an arm that is UAPA. If any media house or if any media person does report a thing, he has to face the music because of that. But despite that, you have seen, I think previously also in this hall, I said this, that what we celebrated that in all that international media carried Kashmir and this and that, we got a huge attention. It was because of those Kashmiri guys who risked their lives, who sent emails outside, and those Kashmiri guys who have reached to the height. They are in the editorial board of Washington Post, in New York Times, in Guardian. So I am very much satisfied to that end. This moment is not going to die by the Indian oppression, by their all tactics. It will remain alive. It has remained alive. It has survived the suppression. It will survive. But it has a cost which we are paying.
A very important question asked by Ambassador Nadeem Riaz Saab. You see, ideologies don't die that soon. Whatever ideology a person is following, a nation is following, a group is following, a country of more than 1 billion, India, more than 500 million people following this ideology of Hindutva. New Zealand has a population of 4.8 million, and RSS has a registered membership of around 7 million. This is what they say. And Indians are masters of lie and untruths. I can tell you from personal experience. I feel that they must be having around 12 million membership of this organization. They deliberately cut it down to 7 million. There are thousands of shakhas, madrasas, Hindu madrasas in each and every city, locality of India, where Hindu ideology is inculcated. And to say that, yes, politics has its own topsy-turviness, has its own vicissitudes. The BJP might lose, might win again, but it will bounce back again. Even if it loses the coming general elections, next general elections in India, it does not mean that it is dead. No, 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 no. Trump has gone, but Trumpism is alive. 48.7 votes, percent votes were given, were obtained by Trump, at that time, if I'm not mixing up the figures. But you cannot say that Trump will never come back or Trumpism will never come back in one manifestation or the other. Here, you've got a Hindu mindset that has been nurtured, that has developed. When there's an inferiority complex multiplied by inferiority complex multiplied by inferiority complex becomes a superiority complex. I'm sorry, I was being a little more figurative, but if you connect this with history, then you'll understand unki bebasi. Unki bebasi. Allama Iqbal, his grandfather, a Hindu Pandit from Kashmir, Ram Sapru, he is a Hindu Pandit, a Kashmiri Pandit from Kashmir, and he converts to Islam. And his grandson is Allama Iqbal, who gives the idea of Pakistan. And that Pakistan is created in 1947. And Kashmir is an issue, a big issue between India and Pakistan. Now you understand? Unki bebasi dekhiye aap. Hamari nahi, unki. God forbid अगर मौलाना मौदूदी के great grandson हिंदू हो जाएं और कहें कि पाकिस्तान के अंदर पाकिस्तान इंडिया बनाना है और खुदा ना खास्ता इंडिया बन जाए, आपकी और हमारी बेबसी कितनी होगी? To look at unki bebasi. I'm not being sympathetic with him, but I'm just trying to be correct. This is how they look at you. They will never look down upon Pakistan. They don't have the capacity. They are impressed with Pakistan in their heart, an average Indian, because of history, because of culture. When I was at the Foreign Service Academy, there was a view inculcated at that time that the people of North somehow historically, geographically, emotionally dominate the people of the South. Pakistan is on the northwestern part of India, and Indians have their own perspective of Pakistan. Sorry for being long in answer. In short, this Hindutva ideology of RSS, it has come to stay. It is deriving strength from white supremacists in the West, the Zionists in the Middle East, and the Buddhists, the fundamentalists elsewhere. And this organization is there. It will go strong. It will become more and more strong. Politically, there will be fluctuations. It might lose, but again it will win. But future belongs to the fascists. Well, this is my view. Everybody has the right to disagree with my view. But as I've said earlier, that during the 1920s, the world was heading towards nationalistic nationalism or nationalistic fascism espoused by Hitler, by Benito Mussolini. Now the world is heading towards religious fascism. And this is something very, very scary.
Thank you, sir. I have two last questions. Sir, what future do you foresee of the Courier party and their leaders? Recently, when Prime Minister Modi met the Kashmiri political leaders, still the Courier and their leaders were marginalized. And do you foresee if and when the lockdown or the curfew-like situation in Kashmir is ended, do you see people like Burhan Wani emerging once again?
People like Burhan Wani has already have emerged in the streets of Srinagar in the different Kashmir Valley. If that's not the case, then why India needs 900,000 army in Kashmir? Why? Because that is the fear which Indians have. As per the All Parties Hurriyat Conference cause concern, you see the political space for each and everybody, except for BJP, has been chalked down in Kashmir. There is no political space for everybody. There is no freedom of assembly or expression for the people. So that's for the all. That is what the actual oppression this time is. That is no freedom of assembly or association or no political space for anybody to come on streets or to talk about it. Even imams and others, they have been ordered. Even yes, today, the police uh, send an advisory all to the people that they should not observe a strike today, to the traders, to the transporters, that there should be no strike today. But even then, the strike was observed by the people of Kashmir. So that's the way the Burhans are there. Everybody is there in Kashmir, but it's time. How long will this remain? This type of atmosphere, as rightly pointed out by Ambassador, this ideology has taken over the Indian judiciary, Indian press, each and everything has been taken over by this ideology. We have seen in previously Indian army, we have countered with them at different occasions, have talked to them. We don't see this type of mindset, what we have after the Bipin Rawat took over as the Indian army chief, the way. So this mindset has taken over all these instances, so we have to face it.
Sir, now I invite President Ambassador Nadeem Riaz for the concluding remarks of the session.
Thank you very much, Humera. It has really been a very, very educative session because, like, we covered a lot of ground. And I think to understand an issue, it is absolutely imperative that you understand the mindset of the people you are dealing with. Ambassador Afrasaib served over there. He interacted with them. And I think he very clearly elaborated on the RSS mindset. It's there to stay. So if they're to stay, then we have to do something to protect ourselves. Mr. Wani wears many hats. I don't need to talk about them. I think the entire world knows about them. And if he says that the Kashmiri movement will continue, it will continue. I strongly believe in that too. And then we had Andleeb Abbas Saiba, and she spoke about the various issues which are present. She spoke about what you young people can do, the civil society. So I think there is a need to continue with the pressure. There is a need to reach out. The government will do what it will do. And in the next session, when Ambassador Amil gives his address, he will tell you about what is being done or what was done in Geneva and in New York. But it is the pressure which one has to build. And that is where the social media comes in. That is where the youth comes in. And that is what we have been telling the Kashmir Committee of the Parliament. That you have to also educate your own youth. You have to tell them what are the facts. Because these days, with free usage of the internet, you can easily be led astray. Am I not right, Ambassador Afrasaib and Mr. Wani and Ambassador Amil? Because there is a need for research institutions to publish what are the facts. And we were very surprised in our internal meetings that there is not one fact book on Kashmir. which you can pick up and it will have the correct facts. So for the researchers, for the youth, it is imperative that you look into the issue deeper. Don't just read on the surface what you get from the Hindustan Times or from the Dawn or from somewhere else. Because if a solution has to be found, it has to be a well-researched thing, and then we can move forward. I would like to thank the panel, all the panelists for being very, very open in their comments, in their views. And let me again remind all the audience that whatever is said at IRS is under the Chatham House rules. So please do not attribute something to someone without taking his or her consent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for moderating, Humaira. And we will have a short break. Unfortunately, I think the Chairman Kashmir Committee is not coming. We'll take a short break, but with COVID protocol, and then we will reconvene in about 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Session of the seminar, which titles Legal Options on Kashmir. The session is chaired by Ambassador Farukh Malik. Ambassador Farukh Malik served as Pakistan's ambassador to Japan, ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations in Geneva, which included serving on the Human Rights Council, and permanent representative to the UN in New York. He also served in Washington, Ankara, and Cairo. He served as chair of OIC, president of G77. Currently, he is a senior research associate at the Intellectual Forum at Jesus College, University of Cambridge. Sir, I now welcome you for your address.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And good morning, it's still morning. Ladies and gentlemen, Honorable President of the Institute of Regional Studies, Ambassador Riaz, thank you for including me in this very, very important day. And I would like to acknowledge my colleagues and friends, Ambassador Afrasaib and other important personalities who are here, including Mr. Wani, and of course the Honorable Parliamentary Secretary, Madam Andleeb Abbas. First, I would like to say that I absolutely learned a lot. We never cease to learn whenever we are in any capacity or at any age group. And many of the things that were said by the eminent speakers, including the introduction by the President of IRS, remain very, very important. And as I was just remarked over coffee to Ambassador Afrasaib, there were so many things that he was saying, and he was always a mountain of information. And I would strongly urge you, those of you who are not familiar with his books, because it's almost, it's encyclopedic mind that he has, and for attention to detail. So you should read what he's been talking about. Of course, many of the things that I wanted to say and I would like to say have already been said, because this is Kashmir is bleeding. This whole terrible day that the Black Day that Madam Andleeb talked about, the fact that 2 years ago, but it's much more than 2 years ago, and I'm so glad that Afrasaib highlighted the fact that whatever happened 2 years ago is only the natural, for the Indians, that natural course of what they were trying to achieve. And shocking as it was for us, and shocking as it was for the human rights people around the world, not that they've got away with it, I still hold out the hope that Mr. Altaf Wani had, that despite all these draconian measures, despite all the cruelties, the 120,000 people that have been killed murdered since 1989, since the first Intifada shuru hua tha in Indian IIOJK. So it's it hasn't ended. But since we're going to talk about the legal options and I will focus on not just the legal options because we have two eminent speakers here who are far more qualified in the legal way to talk about these things. I will refer to some of the aspects that I dealt with in my career, and in particular, I will talk about the legal and the humanitarian case for the resolution of the Kashmir dispute. And from the outset, I would say that it remains strong. Please remember that absolutely remains strong, regardless of what you're told or what you feel. That will get in a big, don't be cowed down by this deluge of information, misinformation that appears on the internet. So that's my sort of opening point. I would then say that the UN Security Council resolutions, they're dated, but so what? They provide a clear and an unambiguous pathway for a structure and a pathway. So in terms of how we're going to deal with this issue legally, of course, people are very impatient. We कब से UN resolutions हैं, कुछ हो नहीं रहा. लेकिन आप ये भी सोचें that India has not been able to demolish them. And I'll give to some of the maneuvering that happens behind the scenes, which doesn't make the media, that does not make the even in academia, would चीजें नहीं आती. And I would reiterate what the speakers had said earlier. Your generation, the younger people, need to focus on this. And I always said, wherever I was, attention to detail, read between the lines, read different resources and sources, and form an opinion and get it published. Get yourself published, of course, in Pakistan, but of course, in foreign journals, because then you need to keep this issue alive. Right. So whilst the political and the diplomatic narrative continues to have its preeminent place, it is the legal and the human rights pathways that have always been a key way forward. The human rights component must have a strong presence in all the legal pathways. I think it's very important to mold the mindset. Now, this is a controversial point, and I'll bring it up for discussion's sake. I don't necessarily subscribe to it, but some have argued that when jihad became the dominant strategy, we lost sight of the true nature of the Kashmir dispute, which is based on human rights, which is based on and supported by the existing legal architecture rooted in binding UN resolutions. In binding UN resolutions, there's been no retraction. India ne bahut koshish ki hai, wo wapas nahi gaye. Just because it's from decades ago does not make it irrelevant. And the younger generation needs to understand this, because आपको बार-बार ये बताया जाता है कि ये पुरानी चीज होगी, we've all moved on, everything is changed. No, the situation has not changed. And in the eyes of the United Nations, it still hasn't changed. I know that in recent in times, the mission in New York has been able to have some sessions, some meetings of the UN Security Council, and it's all there in the newspapers and the media for you to read. Now, let's face it, India has been trying for decades to dilute, to claim irrelevancy. And I'll give you one example when I was there in New York, that how they try to do this. There is something called the Fifth Committee. And these are all, the reason I'm explaining this, it's all the legalistic maneuvering and the bureaucratic maneuvering that takes place outside the glare of the political drama at the Security Council or the Human Rights Council. So there's the Fifth Committee that does all the budget and the financing of the United Nations. So what India was surreptitiously trying to do was to, in the name of improving cost efficiencies of UN expenditure, what they were trying to do was, let's save a little bit here, let's have cost efficiencies. And वो यही कर रहे थे, जो MREs होते हैं ना, made to ready eat meals for UN peacekeeping. वो कहते हैं Congo में खत्म करें, फलानी Haiti में खत्म करें, उसमें UNMOGIP को भी डाल दिया. It's just there, and so you have to be, all of us, and especially, you know, it's your time now. आपको देखना चाहिए, and the lawyers here will be looking at these things. Everybody needs to be a lawyer in that sense, that आप details पढ़ें. And I'm not a trained lawyer. I might have studied international law, but not like the experts have. So we looked at it and we said, no, hold on. ये कहाँ से आ गया? And so if you cut the MREs, then वो खाना नहीं आएगा for UNMOGIP, and so you're basically undermining the UN presence of UNMOGIP. And we cannot let that happen because unke ye that, idhar se choti eat nikali foundation, udhar se choti eat nikali to make the whole thing collapse. So just remember, these things are very important in the legalistic and the bureaucratic fighting that goes on at the UN that doesn't make the national headlines, nor should it. But it's the specialists, we have a very strong diplomatic team in both New York and Geneva and elsewhere who are following these things. So you're both important. And the issue is, well, why is India doing it? Because they're desperate. Ye to nahi hai na that Ambassador Afrasaib was talking about, they put on this brave face and jhoot bol ke, but no. They're, अंदर से उनको पता है, oh God, Pakistan तो हमें चक्करों में डाला हुआ है, and they're just waiting for us to make a misstep, which on something like the MRE, I'm searching, what is an MRE? It's just a khana pina just for the UNMOGIP mission, but you see how that little brick would bring the whole thing down. So it's very important to think about these things. Acha, the other issue, the banner of reverse, the information tide, the negative information that India is able to put out simply because of its size, simply because of its huge diaspora abroad. They've got all kinds of avenues. Of course, they've got Bollywood making these ridiculous, fictitious movies about how successful they have been, and this reinvention of on the lines of Hindutva. So, a global narrative, what we need to do has to be reversed at the critical grassroots level. And this is where I'm going to come back to the legal options. So when the Honorable Parliamentary Secretary was talking about this, I was nodding my head and said, yes, you're absolutely right, because grassroots level pay, it is really, really important. The civil society, particularly in democratic societies, plays a huge role. They influence the government, they influence the parliamentarians. So whether you're looking at, Canada, or you're looking, United States, or any country in Western Europe, and certainly the United Kingdom, where you have so many people of Pakistani origin, the diaspora living there, it's a very, very valuable tool for the civil society to be involved and achieve many things. And in fact, even today, our ambassadors and high commissioners in these countries are organizing important things. And if you look on their websites, you'll see the kind of personalities, even in Canberra, you'll see the kind of personalities who are speaking. And it's because it's a democratic society. It's not the High Commission or the ambassadors feeding them. It's grassroots. It's from their own people. And if that means their own people are predominantly of Pakistani origin, fine, but it influences everybody else, and you can mold the narrative. So it could appear to be uphill, but you need perseverance. And I won't go on too much about the example of the United Kingdom and the Pakistani origin community there, but I think it was pointed out earlier on, many governments could be reluctant on Kashmir. You've seen this, and you said, "Log puchte, but why aren't they?" I was as chair of OIC for 2 years in Geneva. Well, why is such and such country? I don't want to name them. You all know who they are. Wo kyun nahi bolte? And they're not the others who are not outliers, who took a very strong stand. We're talking about Turkey. We're talking about Malaysia. We're talking about Iran. Not the only ones. I mean, both the public leadership and they were talking about it. So that is why Mr. Wani mentioned this, and the Honorable Parliamentary Secretary mentioned this about the people's movement. I hadn't put it in that sense. I was talking about civil society from those countries pursuing legal pathways. And I'd give some kind of options, options what the civil society could do. It can initiate legal cases, civil society. So if you have an association in the United Kingdom or in Canada or Australia, they can initiate all kinds of cases. Now, these are like small, you think they were nothing burgers, but choti si cheez hai. No, it's not. So what you could do is perhaps if the civil society organization, which belongs to that country, is run by nationals of that country, they can lobby and open cases for visa denials to those suspected of human rights abuses in IIOJK. You target them and say, look, this person has, this person has this record, so we have opened a case. Now, whether you're going to be successful or not successful, the legal process will take its course, but you have flagged that individual. That individual's case would be, and you become a nuisance, and you say, "Nee, is bande ko aane nahi dena." Mr. Saxena had committed, oversaw the, he was in charge of that particular police authority where 200 women were raped. How can you have somebody like that coming to your country? So, civil society organized legal movement. So, I think this is very, very important. And you have a resource base, Pakistan origin, British nationals, Canadian nationals, all over Western Europe. I'm talking about democracies. So they're thriving and they can do this. I think it's very, very important. So this is one aspect. Now, the other thing is genuine victims. And we were trying to do this in Geneva. The only problem was that the genuine victims of Indian state terrorism, of human rights abuses, we were trying to bring them to Geneva. But unfortunately, we couldn't bring them. Why? Because obviously the Indians wouldn't let them out. And so what I was trying to do was focusing on children. Now, bachon ko to aapne, you've blinded them, women who've been raped or you've been abused, the sexual violence that has taken place, those people should be allowed to come, but the Indians wouldn't let them out. Now, you also have victims on Pakistan side of the border. Now, who are those? So if someone, some lady is going on a bus, I read it all the time, and they've been shot, or a farmer has been killed, a bacha mara gaya, cross, LOC pe firing ho rahi thi. Why is it that they cannot come and tell their story? Jiski maa nahi hai. And open legal cases, and start, and what it needs is, you can do it here, you perhaps do it in India, unlikely to go anywhere, but you can certainly do it in London or Brussels or Madrid and Rome and Ottawa and Canberra. Wahan aap kar sakte hain. Ye bacha, this child was deprived of his mother because his mother was not a terrorist. She's not infiltrating across the border. We need to open a legal case on why this child has been rendered motherless or parentless. So there's victims on our side that we can take abroad. So it's something to think about. The other thing is, of course, the genuine victims have to be visible in credible global platforms to talk about this, and to talk about this from the human rights perspective within the legal framework. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean every seminar, it's not, because it's not dedicated to Kashmir, aap usme nahi jaye. Aapko jana chahiye, you should appear, these victims and these people, to tell their story in all human rights areas, all legal platforms, and wo can be, these are victims of terrorism. So, for example, someone like the current High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, Michelle Bachelet. I mean, she's a former president of Chile. You know her background. She told me herself what she had to endure. Her father was a general. He was killed. She was imprisoned. She was beaten. There was all kinds of horrible things that happened to her. So when I used to go to her, and her predecessor as well, said, I mean, so Prince Zayed Qutni, he didn't have that personal experience. You have that experience. You see what happens if your rights are taken away from. So you have to keep with this Kashmir report, which I'll come to later. So the important thing is that legal cases, like I said, on children and gender violence must be initiated by the civil society. Now, other than that, the architecture behind and within the multilateral organizations is also very, very important. And Pakistan's voice, or rather the voice of the Kashmiris, needs to be heard in those places. But for the voice of the Kashmiris, which is being suppressed and strangulated, it's difficult. So Pakistan ko bolna padega, and this is part of our diplomatic and political support for them, because in that architecture which exists within and behind the Security Council, the Human Rights Council, jo aapko cheezein visible dikhti hain, there's a whole legalistic and bureaucratic, I mean, it's a Leviathan. It's like these massive structures, and log idhar baithe hain. मैं पहले ये देखता था, knock on a door, and then I'd see someone of Indian origin there. I said, Harbat, why are they here? ठीक है, but if they're fair, but evidently many of them are not. So the issue was that why is our voice not being heard? So I will come to CERD, the Commission on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, CEDAW, the Commission on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. The question, and these are very important platforms. The question we must all ask, and this is, if I may, President Saab, it's Chatham House rules, ask why are we missing from there now? It's a pertinent question, which I think we need to fix that. It's very, very important because quietly behind the scenes, aap baatein kar sakte hain. If you're on CERD, there's 18 other people there. If you're in CEDAW, there's another 33 people there. You meet regularly, and you can talk to them and you can influence them. And as a Pakistani, you're supposed to be neutral, fair enough. But at least you're in that position to raise this issue. Otherwise, aapko discussion hi nahi hoega. And the question is, why are we now missing from these places? So very important. We need to be back there. Acha. Every small step matters. And I think the Parliamentary Secretary said this, alluded to this, because it builds up a canvas. You've got all these faces there, but it builds up each little piece of action, builds up the greater canvas, which is just far more forceful in pushing back on the Indian narrative that there's a new kind of normality in Indian occupied Kashmir. No, there isn't, because why would you need the 900,000 strong military, the security presence? Now, another thing I'd come to is India is chipping away to erase the true map of Jammu and Kashmir. Why is it trying to do that? Because in the global mind, this is a key goal for the Indians. And as working on the India desk for years in the 80s, and वो हर बात ये चाहते थे कि भाई आपका mind है ना, because then your mind, it's a mindset, is the problem. You start seeing things differently when you normalize something. Then you forget that why issue is. So you must insist everywhere, absolutely everywhere, that the neutral UN map remains in place. I had a long struggle with NHK and Nikkei to ensure that they started using in the Nikkei Asian Review magazine when they relaunched it. I think in 14 or 15. Why are you showing this? Shouldn't Japan? You fund the United Nations. Why are you showing this the biased map? Please show the neutral. I'm not saying show the Pakistani map of. I'm telling you that you should adhere to the international standards and the neutral UN map, because ये incremental चीजें होती हैं to brainwash people. So this is very, very important, and I'm laboring on this because जहाँ भी आपको दिखे, the young people need to be writing about this, and not just here. One of our younger colleagues who's in Oxford, studying at Oxford right now, she sent me a WhatsApp message and she said, Victorian Albert, the V&A, is a very influential museum in London. Puri dunya udhar jati. It's reopened. Everybody goes there. So they have this big thing on Buddhism. So they've got the Indian map there, not ours. So how has that happened? अब जो भी जाता है ना, वो automatically Kashmir उन्हीं का है ना, पूरा, not just what they're occupying illegally, but जो आजाद Kashmir भी उन्हीं का, Gilgit Baltistan भी उन्हीं का. How is that happening? So someone, एक चीज पे, we have to stop this, and you do it through not just a letter writing to the curator of the V&A. What you do is you open a legal case, and no institution or no government or anybody or a business publication, उनको ये नहीं अच्छा लगेगा भी हमारी bad news आ रही है. Why is it? Because they don't want to be fighting a court case. And you have to persist, even if you're going to lose, at least आप उनका नाम आ जाएगा in the newspapers, and they'll think, well, all right, we better use that. We can't use the India propaganda map. The only time that they will do it is that अगर ये minor detail अगर हम नहीं बोलें, अगर पाकिस्तानी diaspora नहीं बोलते, चलो ठीक है कोई बोल रहा नहीं है, but ठीक है इंडिया को करने दो जो कर रहा है. So it's very important to do this. Now, we talked about the panelists talked about the cultural genocide that's taken place, the demographic manipulation inflows, but they should not have a free pass on this. This is something within our control, and we can do it through the legal process, which has greater traction and greater visibility. So another point that I would like to raise is amplify what the Indian civil society is saying, but it has to be done in a calibrated manner. What are their courts saying? What are their legal processes saying? Wo kya keh rahe hain? I mean, I see something in our media. I don't see enough, but they are speaking because the Indian human rights, they're under a lot of pressure. So they write from abroad, but they do write. ये तो नहीं करते. And अगर कम भी हैं, उनकी आवाज़ें आपने amplify करनी है. But at the same time, you have to, Pakistan or Pakistanis have to keep a little distance from them because otherwise they'll be accused of being Indian stooges. So जो legal process है, उनकी क्या process, वो क्या कर रहे हैं, हमारी media में आना चाहिए क्यों? उनको हम बता रहे हैं, लेकिन इतना नहीं, as much as I think we could do a sort of a more sort of a boost on that. Now, coming back to what the legal options, the groundbreaking OHCHR report of June 2018. This is extremely important. Now, it's literally the first UN official document that had an opinion on Kashmir that actually echoed what we've been saying for decades. हम यही कह रहे हैं, but ये कैसे हो गया? Now, some people have argued that, हाँ, ये तो बस होना था. No, it wasn't. It was because at that time, the High Commissioner, despite Indian pressure, despite you can't. I mean, I was there. I mean, जो Indian High Commissioner, permanent representative, जो कर रहा था Indian mission and after he published it, because he told me himself that he wrote most of it, there was a vilification campaign against the Prince Zayed. He's Jordanian, but he's married to an American. He's he's a very upstanding and decent individual. But they started to link him with. There was like a disinformation campaign, which we all know about, just a EU disinformation lab. So usme he wrote this. Now, for me, the reason I'm raising this in the legal way is, although it's non-binding, but it provides precise language for legal arguments, because it's a document that's there. Aapke samne hai, the UN has written this. Now they can't retract it. And agar aap kehte hain that because the Security Council resolutions are binding, they're still important, they still remain relevant. Ye ek document hai jispe hame, the government is doing its own thing, but civil society should cite this in their cases and say, ye ho raha hai, we're concerned about the children of a children's NGO could talk about this, or a woman's advocacy organization can say, well, the auton ke saath ye ho raha hai, and talk about this, or the elderly, the old people. If you're young and able-bodied, you can still survive. But just think when you're about 70 or 80 and you see you can't get to the hospital, you don't have enough food, you see your grandchildren being killed. We seem to ignore the elderly as well. So there's all these other civil society organizations that can initiate cases. आप कहीं भी कर सकते हैं, लेकिन आप वहाँ करें जहाँ where the global corporate media is based, and you have to do it in those places. Why? Because आपकी खबर चलेगी, and the whole thing is that India cannot be allowed to get away with the narrative. It's very, very important, and that is why the legal thing is so important. So some people have even argued that the Kashmir report itself was, it sent such a shockwave through Delhi in June that it precipitated the August, this terrible days, this black day, the events. उन्होंने कहा ये क्या हो गया हमारे साथ? I know for a fact, and I knew from other ambassadors there, that Modi was about to recall his own ambassador for this gigantic failure. So ye dekhe na, that it was a success for Pakistan, but it actually, if it was a success for Pakistan, it was a success for human rights and the legal position of Kashmir. सारों ने पढ़ लिया होगा. I strongly recommend आप इसको in detail पढ़ें, the Kashmir report. It's been reiterated in 19 and it's come, but the thing is, वो कहते हैं भी इसके आगे हमने कैसे बढ़ना है? This is one pathway. Civil society, people's movements, particularly in developed countries, the democracies there. But And I think Afrasaib had quite rightly pointed this out. This annexation, this 5th August thing, it is the culmination of what actually was on the BJP election platform. उनके वो साफ कहते थे हम 370 को निकालेंगे, we're going to change this, I mean, it's like, you know, President Trump acting on the endless wars. So it was always there. Now, the other thing is ethnic cleansing. This is just one thing, and I know I don't want to run over in my time. We have the experts here. So ethnic cleansing, and of course, this is still not recognized as an independent crime under international law, but it is, you know, it's coded within the genocide laws. And this was all set up, of course, even now, nobody, I mean, several people say we coined the term, but it all emerged after the disintegration of the former Yugoslavia. But the important thing is that term is being legally used in UN Security Council resolutions. It's being used in the General Assembly. So whatever India is doing in IIOJK can be challenged legally by civil society on this particular issue. So, and in any case, that whole concept from the former Yugoslavia provides an excellent starting point for people wishing to take legal cases. Now, finally, just come to this, we mustn't lose control of the narrative. And I know, and I think the experts may want to talk about this whole issue of lawfare and going to the ICJ and the ICC, organizations. But no, it's not a word of caution, it's just the words for you to ponder over. It's wise to evaluate all the options calmly with the repercussion scenarios. Absolutely important to look at the repercussion scenarios of going there. And of course, this is Chatham House rules. Let's keep it confidential. Absolutely keep it confidential. And the other thing is, in such a difficult situation where India hasn't won, we haven't lost, you know, let's put it where it is. And if the Prime Minister has gone to the General Assembly and articulated many this position, has reflagged and raised the tempo on Kashmir, it actually serves a positive purpose. So why put all your cards on the table? अभी आपको ज़रूरत क्या सारी चीज़ें अपनी strategy बताने के लिए with vis-a-vis going to the ICJ or the ICC? Why tell everybody so that India can plan its moves or counter moves? So this is I would still talk about repercussion scenarios. However, it would be wise, and finally, to pursue a pathway which does not dilute the UN Security Council resolutions under any circumstances. The sanctity of the UN Security Council resolutions must be kept intact, and any pathway that you think chalo ICJ mein jaake baat karte hain, I'm not saying rule it out, have a discussion, there are discussions going on. These resolutions have weathered all kinds of storms. They've weathered, India has been trying for years, decades. हर जगह मैं आपको MREs की बात बता रहा था in the 5th committee, छोटी सी चीज है, लेकिन हर जगह, like उधर जाके ये ईंट खींचनी, वो टांग खींचनी, they're doing it everywhere. So, but the Security Council resolutions have weathered all of that, and for decades. And finally, they are not irrelevant as a legal pathway, and we should not lose heart on this. And I would say finally that they are resilient because they're still there. They're not irrelevant, they are resilient. Thank you very much, President Saab and the audience for hearing me. Thank you. And of course now, yes, I should do the intro. Are you going to do the introduction? No, aap kar le, because you do the introductions and I can sit over there. Because I'm meeting you for the first time.
For this session, we have two honorable speakers, Mr. Oves Anwar and Mr. Dilawar Khan. Mr. Oves Anwar is Director Research at the Research Society of International Law. He joined RSIL in December 2011 and has been serving as the Society's Director of Research since 2017. In 2020, Mr. Anwar was instrumental in launching centers of RSIL, the Center for Human Rights and the Center for Criminal Justice Reform and Capacity Building. During his tenure as the Society's Director of Research, Mr. Anwar has overseen the largest legal study of Pakistan's state practice on human rights for the Ministry of Human Rights. He has led initiatives on business and human rights, including the drafting of a zero draft of a national action plan on business and human rights for the government of Pakistan. He helped develop the National Handbook on Criminal Investigations in Pakistan for the National Police Bureau on orders of the Supreme Court of Pakistan. Additionally, Mr. Anwar's research has fed into the drafting of several federal acts, including the Anti-Terrorism Act 1997 and the Investigation for Fair Trial Act 2013. He is also a member of the Prime Minister's Working Group of Experts on Pakistan's international investment regime reforms. Sir, the floor is all yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much for the excessive intro, I would say, but I'm very grateful to be here. I'm thankful to the Institute for having me. Thank you so much to Ambassador Farukh Amil for the erudite and I would say excellent opening to this session. If you've seen me, observed me while I was listening to his speech, there was a lot of cutting in my speech because he had mentioned a lot of the points that I would be doing. Now, I don't know if Ambassador Saab remembers, but my father was posted with him in Egypt. So I know him since the early 90s when I was about 7, 8 years old. So it's a pleasure to be here. The topic I've been given is illegalities of Indian actions in Kashmir. And before I get into that, I just want to tell you that as a lawyer, there are two aspects, or there are many aspects, but I will only discuss two, which relate to the arguments that lawyers make. The first is that any lawyer worth his salt will give a disclaimer. My disclaimer is that, as Ambassador Saab mentioned, the legal aspect or the lawfare aspect, which has come into vogue recently, is one piece of the puzzle. It is by no means the end all and be all of this debate, and especially the post 5th August debate, though it has become a very important one. I think the importance of the international law aspects has certainly increased and certainly been recognized domestically in that regard. Secondly, when lawyers make their arguments, they aim to convince, they aim to persuade. And on this particular topic, at this particular forum, I don't think there's much convincing or persuasion required. We know what the illegalities are. We know that every action, whether it is the laws passed, the rules made, the regulations promulgated, every government appointment in Jammu and Kashmir, every military deployment, every security action that has taken place, or operation that takes place there, every quota that is set up in an educational institution, and every domicile certificate issued is illegal. And this has been so for the past several decades. And the reason is because of India's original sin, because all of these actions that we see today, whether it is the change in demographics or the atrocities taking place on the Kashmiri people, these are simply fruits of the poisonous tree, the seed of which was planted in 1947, 1948, crystallized a few years later, which was India's denial of the right of self-determination of the people of Kashmir. And the right of self-determination, as very rightly pointed out by Ambassador Saab in his opening, is a human right, a fundamental human right. It is the first article of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So it is essentially the right by which we enjoy our other rights, openly, freely, fully. And so we understand this. We know at this forum, I can at this point say my honor, I rest my case, and I would pretty much gain the audience and win the case if that was it. But there's more to this. If we know that these are the facts, if we know that these illegalities are so blatant and clear, if we're so convinced, why do these facts fall on deaf ears at the international level? And that is something that I want to now convince you on, persuade you on, and hopefully show some skill in that regard. One main reason, again, as pointed out so well by Ambassador Saab, is narrative building. And for quite some time, we've had a particular narrative on it. But I think the failures that one of the reasons for not being able to have the international community really accept this or understand it or go about this could be because of India's diplomacy and because of its this one-point agenda that it has pursued at the UN and at a number of other forums. It could also be failures on our part. Right? We have limitations, also pointed out earlier on. One of those limitations, and I can only speak for my field, is that as we've built our narrative on Kashmir, we have not really looked at the international law implications of it. When we say that India is, I mean, our label for the territory that is occupied by India is occupation. We call it occupied territory. But an occupation does not have meaning outside of its legal context. I mean, we have, a common understanding of what an occupation is. But when it comes to international relations or international law, there is only one meaning, that is an international legal meaning. An occupation is territory that is occupied under the effective control of a power that does not have sovereign title to that land, right? And we have a perfect argument on this. It matches, every dot matches. India does not have sovereign title, not because of simply the UN Security Council resolutions, but it does not have sovereign title because it itself, when it was accepting the instrument of accession, say we give them that argument. They had mentioned that a condition of this instrument of accession is that the people of Kashmir will vote on who, on ratifying this. And that, even on their own terms, does not meet it. And then after 5th August, what we see was the instrument of accession, which they claim their sovereign title to that territory, was violated. So that agreement, the basis, the terms on which they acceded to India, according to its own arguments, does not exist anymore. And that is problematic. Have we been able to build on this? When we speak about occupation or occupied territory, it's often rhetorical. We aren't looking at the underlying dynamics. In fact, when August 5th happened, I know a lot of think tanks were in a bit of a struggling to understand and cope with the new reality, with what has actually happened. Thankfully, our organization, RSL, within 7 days had a legal memorandum that I'm really glad a lot of the entities in Pakistan are taking seriously and really trying to make that part of the debate and the narrative now. And this legal memorandum was focused on explaining this occupation framework, building this narrative that each element, is India a hostile power? Does it have sovereign title to Kashmir? Is it unconsented to effective control over that territory? And all of these elements, the requirements which the International Committee of the Red Cross, the requirements of international humanitarian law, the Hague regulations, we looked at all of those and we gave a categorical opinion and we explained this. And what I'm really glad is that currently in Indian universities, Delhi University included, that legal memorandum is being taught. So these, I mean, I don't boast or anything, but this is the type of engagement with international law that we haven't done. Because when we were trying to make this legal memorandum, we did not have the material there beforehand. Now, I know that the Foreign Office has certainly done a lot of work on this, and multiple exercises have been done specifically on these issues. But it's about engaging not just with the diplomatic community, but also with the academic community. And what I wanted to also discuss here was that when you then reframe or fully understand the implications of an occupation, your debate changes from human rights abuses, because you don't just have human rights abuses in an occupation. Occupation is a type of an armed conflict, right? And I'm sure Dilawar Saab will discuss this in more detail. In an armed conflict, you have war crimes. Violations of the laws of war are not called simply human rights violations, they're called war crimes. And building that narrative, we've only recently begun to do. I mean, it's better late than never, but we had several decades to also be building up on that. And that is, I think, part of the failure of developing that correct narrative on this. What can we do now? What we can do now, there's a number of options. Some of them have already been highlighted. I just want to touch upon a few more. And then we will move on to the next. One is building a case for these war crimes and building a case for crimes against humanity. So the types of actions that are taking place in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir are clearly amount to grave violations of the Geneva Conventions. So that, which is the definition of a war crime, and certainly are a state pattern of severe human rights abuses, which is the definition of a crime against humanity. And so we meet those thresholds. Now it's simply, the advocate for the Kashmiri people, it's our job to ensure that this is listened to. There's also pursuing individual accountability. As was discussed, we need to start naming and shaming the individuals involved. This is not just this generic Indian atrocities. There is a particular man behind giving the order for this. And that man needs to be held accountable. And it doesn't mean that he's going to go and see the inside of a jail cell. It's highly unlikely, in fact, and I will tell you this first, but what he can be denied, as already mentioned, is his visa to, say, the United States or to the UK or to Australia, because all of these countries have laws. He could be sanctioned. So there could be travel restrictions, there could be financial, he couldn't open a bank account, which would have dealings with Australian banks or UK banks. And this is only possible because domestically within these countries, the UK, the US, there are a number of laws called Magnitsky legislation or Leahy legislation. In the US, for example, the US State Department, it does a lot of programs all around the world. You know, it's a donor, it funds that. It cannot fund a training of a person who's involved in human rights violations. So every person who's trained in Pakistan, say, on a US State Department program, has to first be Leahy vetted by the US State Department. Right? So his name, his unit, if he's a member of the police or something like that, will go to the US State Department, be vetted there, and then he'll be allowed to be part of that training. So these are types of the restrictions that we can start imposing and at least argue for. Utilizing universal jurisdiction. There are a number of countries that have extraterritorial jurisdiction for their courts for criminal acts. We have the case of General Pinochet, who has been tried like that in European courts. And there are a number of other courts. Argentina is an excellent example. Germany is another. The UK has this, but the UK requires a politician to make the final decision, the Attorney General, which is unlikely given relations currently. We also have part of these international sanctions measures that I've already discussed, but also other legislation within other countries, such as the Alien Torts Claims Act. So if there's a US citizen Kashmiri who's impacted by something that the India has done, action can be taken there in US courts. We also have the BDS movement, which is a very successful movement that has targeted Israeli actions, occupation in Palestine. And that is something that has started developing for the Kashmir cause as well, but that is something that can be strongly advocated for and developed. And what essentially happens is that college campuses then become your battleground, where you have young students who are voting, who are acting and demonstrating for the Kashmiri people. So it's not just you're multiplying the advocates for Kashmir, and that is something that also needs to be looked at. Now what I want to discuss is, we've looked at these options, and this is just what I could cover in 5-10 minutes. Very briefly, I'm just going to take 2 more minutes and say, why have we not pursued this? We've had 7 decades. And one reason for this is you need to build capacity. International law, some call it lawfare capacity, is critical, has been critical for the longest time, and it has been neglected, sadly. Enough attention hasn't been paid. And if I were to put this in militaristic terms, this is a front that we have left unmanned or poorly manned. I mean, we have people who are working within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Law, the Attorney General's office, who look at matters of international law. But the level of seriousness that it deserves, sadly, has not been met. And my final point would be that developing international capacity is not simply advertising for 10 jobs. It requires engagement with academia. And I'll tell you why this is. Because regular lawyers, if they need clarity on a judgment, they just have to wait maybe a month or so, and a judge will give a judgment on that issue and clarify it. We have the ICJ, international lawyers, and ICJ gives a judgment maybe every 5-10 years, an authoritative one. And so we don't have that option. So the debate on international law, how it develops, is in the classroom or through research. And that's why one of the sources of international law is scholarly publications. If you look at Article 38 of the ICJ statute, that mentions, as a subsidiary source, but as a source nonetheless, that scholarly writings are a source of law for international law. So my only argument here would be that we really need to focus on this. India's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has roughly about 34 lawyers. Ours currently has 2. So simply match numbers. This isn't an issue where you need millions of individuals involved. You simply need to develop that critical mass of domestic expertise. Sadly, at this moment, if I were to give you an assessment, you can count on your fingers the number of international experts Pakistan has. That is very, very dire for a country of 200 million with the stakes, with what is at stake for us. So as we acquired or improved our conventional capability when it came to the military, when we determined that there was a need for nuclear capability, we acquired it. through many sacrifices. Now I think post 5th August is the time for acquiring a lawfare capability. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Oves Anwar. My second speaker is Mr. Dilawar Khan. He is the Executive Director of the Center for Learning Law and Business. Mr. Khan is also the founder of Code Pakistan, an Islamabad-based not-for-profit organization which aims at promoting peace, tolerance, and inclusivity in Pakistan. The organization has worked with an impressive array of national and international partners, including the ICRC, UNDP, UNHCR, USIP, as well as NECTA and HEC. Prior to founding Code Pakistan, Mr. Khan has worked for over 12 years with an impressive range of international organizations. His background of working in the development sector has allowed him to spearhead research projects on issues covering the need for reformation of the criminal justice system as it pertains to addressing overcrowding in prisons, the Afghan refugees in Pakistan, the importance for greater interaction between the mainstream education system and madrasas, and many others. More recently, he co-authored a report titled Post-Merger Provision of Security and Justice Services in Malakan Division and Torgar, Lessons for KPMD. So the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Ambassador Amil, for giving a very solid start for what my talk is going to be. And thank you, Ambassador Riaz, for closing the concluding remarks, because that's where my concluding remarks are. So that's the benefit of being in a scholarly audience like this. Your job becomes not only easier, but it becomes easier for the audience as well, where the same point is repeated. That means that the point is significant enough that different minds and different people from different backgrounds are thinking in the same way. So as a lawyer, I'll present that as an evidence that yes, if we are thinking alike, there is enough evidence that we should pursue the goals and the objectives that we are discussing. There is a consensus. And when there is a consensus, it means that the information is credible enough that you can build upon. So, and the previous speeches, of course, I had the opportunity to listen to Ambassador Afrasaib and Altaf Wani and Oves. I will be restricting my discussion to one point, because it would be easier for the audience that if we have to move, we need to move in a direction. There are many important issues. Ambassador Amil referred to it, Oves referred to it, women, children, elderly, combatants, non-combatants. The list is pretty exhaustive and long. There is a well-established principle that injuring or killing of a person's not taking part, and now I'm speaking law, in hostilities which is prohibited under widely accepted international legal instruments aimed at protecting life and dignity of human beings without discrimination, including ICCPR, international humanitarian law, international human rights law, and even domestic legislations all over the world. Arbitrary deprivation of life under any circumstances is prohibited. So there is no specific reference, except that there are cases in which the state has the mandate, because there are two things which is the monopoly of the state: the justice and the security. I might be a rich man and a rich doctor, I can make a private hospital. As a rich lawyer, I cannot go and establish a court. So that's the monopoly of the state. And there are reasons behind it. With specific reference of today's discussion, India being party to ICCPR Article 6 is applicable on Indian Army categorically, without any confusion, whether it be the Special Task Force, Border Security Force, and state-sponsored paramilitary groups or village defense committees, and must be treated as state agents and therefore must abide by international humanitarian law and international human rights treaties. The government of India is ultimately responsible for the actions without any doubt. Now, IHL is applicable to situation in Kashmir, and I'll use Common Article 3 to the 4 Geneva Convention that provides standards governing the conduct of parties to the conflict, which clearly defend the civilians and those not taking part in hostilities. I appreciate the wisdom of the lawyers then, back in 1850s, who were initially drafting the law. And I appreciate the wisdom to the date that the words they used were of course taken from ancient texts. So if we look at Mahabharata, if we look at Quran, if we look at all other religious and important scholarly work, so they have used the words very intelligently. And why? For days like today, where we, in a scholarly manner, may interpret them accordingly. So they have left that gap. In international law, it's Akhdi Kamba, people not taking part or no longer taking part. So not taking part is very clear, and that's my one-point agenda, civilians. Be it women, be it children, be it elderly, but civilians, not taking part. The wordings of the law is absolutely clear. Not taking part, civilians. No longer taking part, there could be combatants who are injured. So even the law goes to that extent that the moment you are not taking part in active hostilities, the rules of the civilians would apply on you, which means that no force can take your life. And there is a military justification behind it. It's not that it's totally humanitarian. There is a military justification and the strategy behind it, that why in times of war, it is more important to injure and capacitate your enemy rather than killing them. Because killing, willful killing, would be a grave breach. And I give this example that imagine a paratrooper coming down, and this would be a question for the audience. If the paratrooper is coming down all dressed, uniform, with a gun, and you are a commander on the ground, is he or she a legitimate target? Quickly, yes, no. Uniform, gun, airborne, coming towards you. Is he or she a legitimate target? Yes, he is or she is. You can kill or bomb or attack in any way that you wish. That's the international military law. But for some reason, while coming down, the poor commander, lady or man, lost the gun and stuck in a wire somewhere or in a tree, has not reached the ground. Is he or she a legitimate target? No. Now, no longer taking part. So international law is this tricky. So this house has decided that the person has not reached the ground, and 2 stages of international law are applicable. So that's how international law is. That's why there has been a lot of debate on international law, whether international law is an applicable instrument or not, whether it is a good instrument or a bad instrument. So being an international law student, I always advocate that, no, this is a very important international law. If, like ostriches, we put our head in sands, we don't see the value of it, that's another problem. But international law is a very important instrument. Now, Akhdi Kamba, where is it coming from? If in Islam we see Surah Baqarah, mat lado unse jo nahi ladte tumse. Aur Allah Ta'ala ne had se tajawuz karne walon ko pasand nahi kiya. That's Akhdi Kamba. Do not fight, or no longer taking part. Mat lado unse. So there are clear indications, there are clear historical writings and precedents, which has a very clear. Now, The problem starts when you yourself start confusing the elements. So as Ambassador Saab and Oves said, we need to take a position. And that position should be very clear. And once you take a position, then that is the position. So that needs prior discussions. What position we may take? Now, if we look at the position that I'll be explaining in a minute, there are principles of distinction. So when we say don't kill civilians, so there is a principle of distinction that you need to distinguish between a military and a civilian object. So it's an established principle. You have the principle of proportionality. Don't kill a sparrow with a cannonball. So you have a principle of proportionality. So that's another legal position that you have. Then you have military necessity. I was listening yesterday to the US Secretary of State on Kabul attack, and he said, the United States will not support any government that would come by the use of force to gain government. It's a good declaratory, diplomatically correct statement. So the evidence that we need to generate to take these statements and say, fair enough, this is an excellent statement. How about applying this on another position? So you have to box the diplomats in their own words. And that's the trick. And that's not easy. That needs a very strict eye on media, open resource, and then working closely with the government. And there is a method to it, and I'll explain. So my discussion today reminded me when Mr. Arish told me that I have to come here, and I'm very humbled and honored. I was thinking like what that one point could be, because having an audience of this caliber, they most stand educated on key subjects. So it took me to 1899 of the Hague Regulations, when before Hague Regulations, the Russo-Turkish War and the Russians and the Germans and the Great Britain. And there was this gentleman, a diplomat from the Russian delegation, Floyd Martin. And he coined during those times a clause, which till date is known as the Martin's Clause. And the Martin Clause said that civilians and combatants remain under the protection and authority of the principles of international law derived from established customs. So that was the time when Geneva Convention was only 2 Geneva Conventions. Now we have 4 Geneva Conventions with 2 additional protocols and many more. From the principles of humanity and dictates of public conscience. And that is where this was like 12 Angry Men movie. If somebody has watched, he converted the whole discussion and brought in a concept which was favoring Russia then, and included a clause which even then Martin would not have thought that even after 120 years, he would be part of the international law in such a significant manner. Now, it was J.J. Rousseau also, the philosopher, who gave the same concept that in war times, the warring parties should not consider each other as their personal enemies because they're acting on behalf of someone. So the respect should be there. The principles of distinction, military necessity, and prevention of unnecessary sufferings as follows: that the only legitimate object which states should endeavor to accomplish during war is to weaken the military forces of the enemy, that for this purpose it is sufficient to disable the greatest possible number of men, that this object would be exceeded by employment of arms which uselessly aggravate the sufferings of disabled men or render their death inevitably. And then this philosophy was incorporated in Additional Protocol 1 to the Geneva Conventions in 1977. When Ambassador Saab was talking about the importance of the civil society, I would add to it that, don't you recall the few images that changed the history of the world and the wars? The 16-year-old Vietnam girl back on fire, napalm bomb. It was a legal issue. And why it was a legal issue? Because napalm fire, you can't take it out. So it keeps on burning. So they said that fire might be an acceptable act in war, but the characteristic of a weapon which goes beyond a certain military objective should be illegal. Dum-dum bullets, laser blinding weapon. This was one of the kind of the weapons that the convention, before the weapon was introduced, it was banned because it has the capability of blinding you for the rest of your life. So that was challenged before it was marketed, and that was challenged by the actions which Ambassador Saab has referenced, that you need to come out. You need to come out in a scholarly article. You need to talk about it. You need to make a discussion. Now, Martin Clause, and then the challenge was that has Martin Clause ever been used by the judgments? Because as a lawyer, I appreciate the scholarly work, but my refuge is always in the judgments. That is there any judgment? So there was a case of Kling, decided in 1946 by the Supreme Court of Norway. The defendant, a member of Gestapo, had been charged with maltreatment and torture of the Norwegian patriots under the Norwegian Criminal Code of 1902, jointly with a royal decree of 4th May 1945 that gave courts the power to impose death sentences instead of imprisonment for acts such as those perpetrated by the claim. Having been sentenced to death by the Court of Appeal, the defendant appealed to the Supreme Court claiming that the application of the royal decree to acts that he has committed before May 1945 was at variance with Article 97 of the Norwegian Constitution, whereby no law must be given retrospective effect. Now, some of you, if you have the law background, this is a very solid argument that you cannot treat me in retrospective with if there is no wrong, there is no if there is no right, there is no remedy. Ubi jusai by remedium. The Supreme Court by majority dismissed the appeal. Judge Scow, who delivered the judgment, held that the grave acts of torture, of which Killing had been guilty for, were not only expressly prohibited by the Norwegian law, but were also contrary to the laws of humanity and the dictates of public conscience mentioned in the Martin's Clause. So it was part of the judgment. But the judgment in itself speaks that you should not restrict yourself which party, you should take the main position. Civilians, if you disagree with the willful killing of the civilians, that's the position. That there are no derogations. You cannot derogate from certain standards. And those certain standards are not only enshrined in the holy books, in the constitution, in the daily routine, but these are the common grounds, these are the common principles. That's where right to life, right to livelihood, right to education. That's why Chapter 1 of the Pakistan Constitution speaks of the rights. Another example was the Crook case decided in 1948 by the United States Military Tribunal at the Nuremberg. Though the Nuremberg tribunals were generally called the victors' tribunals, but still, if there is a judgment, there is a judgment. The defendant had been accused of having exploited territories occupied by German armed forces in a ruthless manner, far beyond the needs of the army occupation and in disregard of the needs of the local economy. Now, this one sentence has many things. It is not stopping the military action. It is suggesting that the military action was in access to what was required and disregarding what? The economic, the local economy. So they were taking two things, and that is local economy deals with what? Livelihood. You don't give me food, I die. But you say, I'm not maltreating him. But the end result is that I die. So if I die, so that's my basic human right. So you need to give me food. The tribunal mentioned various provisions of the Hague Regulations on belligerent occupation, in particular Article 46 to 56, and found that those provisions were binding upon Germany, not only as a treaty, but as a customary law. Because when there was no international law, there were laws. So there were religious laws, there were belief laws, there were tribal laws. And for the ease of this audience, all were categorized as customary laws. So the origin of international law is a customary law, and the customs goes back then to the religion and other texts. So the preamble to 1899 and 1907 Hague Convention is a much more pious declaration. It is a journal clause making the usages established among civilized nations. When Oves was talking about naming, shaming, so you come to this clause and you say, when you name and shame people, that if we are talking of a civilized nation, these are some of the essentials that the civilized nations are made of. So you develop the ingredients of a civilized nation, that if you have these 5 characteristics, right? So that makes you certain thing. So every position has a criteria. Every state and every individual has a criteria. So if there is a president IRS position, it comes with certain characteristics that one has to qualify. Then you can qualify to be called that position. So if we are talking of civilized states, we need to come up with the ingredients that civilized states are made of what. And then you come down to these things. And that is when you start the naming and shaming. And the dictates of public conscience into the legal yardstick to be applied if and when specific provisions of convention and regulations annexed to it do not cover specific cases occurring in warfare or in occasions associated with warfare. Somebody would say, and I'm a lawyer with a very clear direction. They say that if India has not signed this, if India has not done this, no. Civilians being killed, civilians being killed. One violation does not justify another violation. So there has to be clarity, and that clarity has to come from Riyasat. It has to come from the state, because this is the monopoly of the state. We all can complement the effort. We all can amplify the words, but it has to come from the state. The third and the last example, and I have worked in the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia back in 2001. Everybody said, "Kya zarurat hai is tribunal ki?" What this tribunal has done. I have seen Slobodan Milosevic every morning coming 9 a.m. मैं उसके बाद आता था. My fame was कि मैं Milosevic के बाद अदालत पहुंचता हूँ. My house was, लेकिन उसको तो escort में लेकर आते थे, मैं पैदल जाता था. तो Milosevic once said, "Can you remove my 25 kg of metallic jacket because it's Den Haag and it's very heavy for a man of my age to carry this?" The judge said, "No, this is the protocol. You have to wear it." I saw a defeated man, the head of the former Yugoslavia, and the atrocities, if you are not aware of ICT in the former Yugoslavia, if you have a heart, read it. If you don't have a big heart, don't read it. They don't have mass graves because they would kill people, bomb people, then make a plow and mix them in the fields so that you don't leave evidence. And then people say international law is not important. They were scared that if they leave mass graves, there will be evidence. I saw a weak Milosevic. And that's the power of international law. That's where we need to go. So the trial chambers in ICTY in Martich decision handed down in 1996 under Rule 61 of the ICTY Rules of Procedure and Evidence, Martich, the former president of self-proclaimed Republic of Serbia, Krajina, had been accused of having ordered the shelling of Zagreb on 2nd and 3rd May. That's the kind of evidence we need. Kashmir mein bahut zyadati ho rahi hai. That's a good journalistic statement. It can be a good headline. And I remember there was one selection in Pakistan जिसमें headline थी कि तीर टूट गए, दिए बुझ गए, शेर छा गया. So everybody in the local context know कि People Party हार गई, PML जीत गया, PTI हार गई. That's good for journalists. We need evidence like this. Who did what and on which day? So that's what makes your case. So 2nd and 3rd of May 1995, which resulted in the killing of innocent civilians, the trial chamber found that the shelling was a war crime. It violated the rules of a customary and treating law prohibited attacks on the civilians, in particular attacks on civilians by way of reprisals, as well as principle whereby the right of the parties to an armed conflict to choose methods and means of warfare. This is for researchers like yourself, this is a whole new world, the methods and the means. So you have to choose both intelligently by keeping the principles of proportionality and military necessity. That you may have a big weapon, but do you need that big weapon? Pallet guns we talk about. And I have the experience of bringing the doctors to the discussion. And somebody told me, like, how on earth doctors are responsible and can contribute in international law. And I had a whole long series with the doctors when there was a conflict going on in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, that the doctors would explain that the kind of wounds that they are getting in the hospital, can they operate? What are the challenges? Because if all the bullets are spread everywhere, you're making the work of the doctor challenging. So the lawyer then, in consultation with the doctor, blame the method of the warfare. So doctors are important because the doctors say there is a load on my hospitals. So when Ambassador Saab and Oves and the previous speakers were talking about the narrative, the civil society, many people should come and join the effort. That's the kind of a strategic approach Pakistan has to take. And that is the position which Pakistan has to take, that I'll bring everybody on board. So if somebody is a clinical psychiatrist or a graded psychiatrist, the degree is not awarded by Institute of Regional Studies. The degree is awarded by FCPS and the institutions. So if somebody is a graded psychiatrist or somebody is a graded surgeon or somebody who is a graded physician, if they give a position, their institution and the institution from where they are bringing their degree is their legitimacy. So you make them say things, and that becomes a scientific evidence. And lastly, to sum it up, all the discussion, we need one article, that is Article 1 of the Geneva Conventions, which says all the high contracting parties should respect and ensure respect of the present convention. Pakistan, India, along with 198 countries signatory to the Geneva Conventions, why should we look for other complicated documents which may be controversial, which may be challenging? So let's take Geneva Convention, the first article, and say we respect. But now the second part says, and ensure respect. So ensure respect is for who? It's not for Pakistan. It is for other states. So the first option is you go diplomatic. The state goes to the state and say, I'm a party to the Geneva Convention and I need part 2 of the convention to be respected, which means ensure respect. So what Abbas said, lay waiting, trading obligations, scholarships, education, admissions. So that is where Pakistan has to go from country to country and asking one thing, that to respect Article 1 and part 2 of it. Because part 1, I'm doing it because the law says respect. So how can I respect more than this, that I'm coming to you and I'm sitting with you? Now it's your part. If it fails, you keep a list. And then you are working with the war correspondents, with the journalists, with the jurists, with the scholars. And as soon as the Pakistan state comes back and say, well, state C has a very weak response, and you have people there and you say, now I will be going cautiously public. Because by going cautiously public, one should always remember that your action should not in a negative way make the situation more grave for those who are facing the situation. On this note, I thank you, sir, again for this lovely opportunity. We are very saddened by the situations and we seriously want to contribute. And I hope that such efforts be it a drop in the ocean, but I think these are important. And for young researchers and scholars, I would say, keep walking, keep doing, because you never know. This could be one napalm bomb picture. This could be one Syrian boy on the shore. This could be one Malala. This could be one Sharbat Gula that can change the events. So photos are also very important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dilawar Khan. As we are short on. So can we do it on during lunch? We can do it on during lunch. As we are short on time, I will move on to the concluding session of the seminar today, which will be done by Ambassador Riaz Hussain Khokhar, who served as the Foreign Secretary of Pakistan from June 2002 to February 2005. Ambassador Riaz Khokhar also served as Pakistan's ambassador to India, the United States, and China. Ambassador Riaz Khokhar supported the composite dialogue between India and Pakistan and has expressed determination in resolving the Kashmir dispute till it gets resolved. So now I request Ambassador Khokhar to present his concluding remarks. He will be joining us online. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir, you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. First of all, President Nadeem Riaz, Ambassador Nadeem Riaz, President of the IRS, thank you very much for giving me the privilege of making the concluding remarks of this very fascinating, very interesting webinar. May I say that we heard a very passionate speech from the parliamentary secretary. I would have recommended that this day be observed. There should have been a joint session of the parliament where not only the Prime Minister, but I think all the principal opposition leaders should have spoken as the voice of the nation. I think it's regrettable. Just look at your cell phones. You will find some message from the government of Pakistan saying that we stand shoulder to shoulder with the people of Jammu and Kashmir. The parliamentary secretary made some very pertinent observations. I compliment her. I compliment the Director General of South Asia, Nizamani, who made a very fine presentation of the government's position. And I also want to compliment Ambassador Afrasaib, who's a very serious scholar, for having given an excellent presentation on the mindset of the RSS, of the BJP, and what actually drives them. That actually is a very critical subject. This last session, Ambassador Amil, very comprehensive picture of the political legal options and very excellent presentations by Mr. Oves Anwar and the last speaker, Mr. Dilawar Khan. My warmest greetings and congratulations for, I felt very educated after listening to all of you. Now, what happened? It's not that one fine morning Modi got up and had a dream and decided to do what he did on August 5, 2019. This was a very wonderfully worked plan that the Indians were going to implement. Indian government, BJP government, and their father organization, the RSS, had decided to go in for what they consider the final solution of the Kashmir dispute. Indians are not only arrogant, but they're also very thick-skinned. They don't care a damn what the rest of the world thinks. This is basically the attitude of this present government today. Modi is a murderer, is a killer. In fact, if you would recall, the United States had refused a visa to him because of the Gujarat riots. But now they have taken this action. And why did they take this action? Because they came to a conclusion after 3-4 months of hard work that if we take this action, Pakistan will not be able to do anything. Now, sadly, ladies and gentlemen, please don't mind my frankness. I have served in India for 10 years. And I had the privilege of having Afrasaib as one of my colleagues. He has said it very, very nicely. The list that was read out by my good friend Nizamani on what India should be doing in order for Pakistan to enter into talks. Afrasaib is right. India will do nothing. They will not retract anything. If anything, they have further plans, not only for how to steamroll things in Indian occupied Kashmir, but also how to deal with Pakistan or how to deal with the international community. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there is no such thing as international conscience. It only wakes up when there are special national interests. I mean, somebody referred to these 3 meetings in the Security Council. Hello, sorry? Security Council. But these were informal meetings, but we couldn't go very far. The crux of the matter is that the whole thing rests on real politics. Today, the world is in a flux. The situation, especially in our region, is very complicated. Pakistan has some extremely difficult diplomatic and strategic challenges to face. And within our resources, we certainly are doing as best as we can. Now, I think Amil referred to the UN resolutions and how relevant, and they are never out of date, and that they will remain eternal until the problem is resolved. But our own politicians, our own leaders had ridiculed or undermined these very resolutions. The first man to do it was General Musharraf. And I want to be on record that I wrote a 4-page note to him saying how wrong he is. Of course, I was not very popular with him, but by and large, it was my responsibility as Foreign Secretary to put it on record that he was wrong. Then we've had prime ministers who, have not taken these matters too seriously. So now we are talking about a dialogue with India. Dialogue about what? As far as India is concerned, they think they are on the way to a final resolution of Kashmir. What is required? First of all, we need to be very clear about our priorities. We have to be a strong, stable, democratic, united, economically strong country. This is a big question mark, and I don't want to go into any details. It's because of the sort of mess that India saw in Pakistan that they were able to take this step. Secondly, when we talk about forgetting the past, what does one conclude? The general conclusion in India, I'm sorry to say, the general conclusion in India about these kind of remarks or these kind of ideas is Pakistan thak gaya. They are coming round. They are coming round to accepting what they call existing realities. This is the greatest challenge that Pakistan is facing. I'm on record, I've said it on TV before. Statements, people are doing very good job. I mean, we have some of the best people deployed in key capitals. They're doing as much as they can. They have limited resources. But we can fight this battle only if we are taken seriously as a country. Because internal policies and foreign policy are two sides of the same coin. So we need to really focus very much on what is happening here. Secondly, I have a very bad reputation about India, and I don't care a damn about that. But my view is very simple. The most hackneyed phrase in our diplomatic parlance in regard to the Kashmir issue is legal, political, and diplomatic support. Please change this. What the people who are struggling inside Kashmir, who are fighting one of the most brutal governments, brutal regimes in the world, which has deployed 1 million soldiers. And that's 1 million is only the people in uniform. Add another 200,000 who are from the intelligence, the Indian Gestapo, what they are doing to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Demographic picture will be changed. Nothing is stopping the Indians. And they're taking heart from this fact that the international community has not really spoken very much about it. Yes, the media has written about it. Let's not be unfair to the Western media and other medias. The television programs have been BBC, some other British newspapers have written about it. But what matters is what happening on the ground. Media focuses on news, but Kashmir is not on their radar screen 24/7. So we have a responsibility, and I think very eminent proposals and ideas have been made here in the seminar on how Pakistan should proceed on the diplomatic level, the political level, and the lawfare. I feel very educated about the points raised in the last session. My view is who is going to put all this thing together. Foreign Office is a very small institution. Please remember that. I was Foreign Secretary, I can tell you that. We're only 450, 500 people, small missions, limited resources. So this requires a gigantic effort. Imran Khan has made an effort, yes. He's made that speech at the General Assembly. It was very well received. I don't know how much media coverage he got, but a single speech is not going to change anything. Indians are not only arrogant, but they are also thick-skinned. Please remember that. And they have come to the conclusion that the international community may not approve of what they have done, but they have because of geopolitical, movements that are taking place, and because of the fact that India is big and it's a huge market for a lot of Western countries. Okay, but nothing really will happen. I pray, and I hope you join me in this prayer, that one day we see this rascal Modi in the place of Milosevic. I don't know when it will happen, maybe not certainly in my lifetime. But those who think in this country, our leadership or people in our institutions, that small gestures will change India's mindset, that will not happen. Afrasaib is right. They will do nothing. They will change nothing. They will reverse nothing. And as I said, they have plans for us. It's not only, as Afrasaib said very rightly, Kashmir is clearly a very important piece of the puzzle, of the dispute. But there are larger issues. And are we ready for all that? That's what I'm trying to say. I wish to compliment the IRS, and particularly the President, for having convened this seminar. I apologize for my absence, physical absence at the Institute. I'm kind of a vulnerable stage, so please do forgive me. But my final remarks are, let's get serious. If you want this thing, the Kashmiri movement is alive, as Mr. Wani said to us. Kashmiri movement, the young people are struggling, the people are sacrificing, but they need support. And what I say, it may not be very popular, let's talk about full spectrum support, which means don't rule out anything. Because whatever I'm saying, and I'm leaving this phrase for you people to decipher, under the United Nations Charter, it's justifiable. So, thank you very much. I deeply appreciate the invitation from Ambassador Nadeem Riaz for these concluding remarks. I'm not so sure I've made any, shall we say, revelations or come up with any solutions. But solution lies in you in two things: a united, strong Pakistan. We are a nuclear power. We cannot be pushed around. But Indians came up with this formula that the international community will restrain Pakistan from any. And now I'm not suggesting war. I'm not suggesting that we invade India tomorrow. No. but don't rule things out, because they have not ruled out anything against Pakistan. What are they doing inside Pakistan? So we've got a front against India, we've got a front against Afghanistan, they are collaborating, and we've got a hybrid war going in Pakistan. So we are already at war with India. So please, I don't want to emphasize too much about it, but our politicians, our institutions have a responsibility, not by making hot air statements, but being serious about taking certain steps that are necessary for getting this movement and supporting the people of Jammu and Kashmir, who are struggling against the most brutal regime in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, Ambassador Riaz Khokhar. I extend my gratitude on behalf of the Institute of Regional Studies to all the distinguished speakers and the audience for joining the Institute today on this very important day. I now request everyone to join us for lunch. Thank you so much once again.